What's up? What's happening on what day is today? Wednesday? I think it's Wednesday. Meadow Chris in for Anthony. One more day here. Chris, it's Wednesday, right? Okay, just making sure. My whole world has just been rocked, changed. I still feel uncomfortable after hearing Linnell and Russell yell at each other. I see them down the hall, and I kind of just want to bring them back in here and see if they need to talk through anything. There seemed to be real acrimony. There seemed to be real consternation. There seemed to be real something going on between the hours of 1 and 4. And I'm nervous because they're doing it again tomorrow. They have their throwdown Thursday. I don't know what they call Wednesdays. Wild would work. Oh, my God. There seemed to be real stuff there. Windbag Wednesday, I'm told. Seemed to be a lot more than just wind. Seemed to be rain, fire, and hail. Oh. Anyway, we're going to talk about the NBA playoffs a lot today. Obviously been mostly draft focused, and we will talk a little bit more draft. You'll hear from Jordan McGee and Brandon Coleman later in the show. If you missed them on with Linnell and Russell, play the best of what they had to say in their interviews. We will also hear from a TCU insider on Coleman at 5:30. My pal Howard Beck stops by at 4:30. Ben Standig at 5. So we'll hit a bunch of different stuff, including some draft in that 5 o'clock hour and some Commanders in that 5 o'clock hour. But right now, we talk about last night in the NBA and what a finish it was between the Sixers and the Knicks. And it was both a great and terrible showcase of NBA basketball. The shot making, the fearlessness, there's so many good things to say about Tyrese Maxey, and I'm going to say them in just a moment. But I can't help but start with how sloppy the end of that game was. The amount of turnovers, and it's not just like, of course, there's some that's great defense, right? There's some, there's a play where Joel Embiid drives and Mitchell Robinson strips Embiid, and you're like, damn, that's a great defensive play. But you're also like, dude, Embiid, come on. And I'm not here to bash Embiid. Dude had a triple-double fighting through sickness. He's been battling this Bell's palsy thing. He's got a lot going on, and I think that people unnecessarily crap on Embiid because of some of his playoff stuff when dude seemingly has been fighting through injury and has had some good performances, like last night even. Like when a 19 and 16 and 10 triple-double isn't good, like what kind of greatness are we talking about there? But on that particular play, like you'd expect a player as great as Embiid to have better ball security in a big spot. And Jalen Brunson has a huge turnover at the end of the game. And there's a couple of other possessions where guys are just sloppy with the ball. And in some ways it's great because it's scrappy and it's intense and you get the best of the competition. But what real greatness is in the playoffs, and the reason why I ultimately, one of the takes here is that I'm not that scared of the Knicks if I'm, say, the Celtics, is the ability to survive that moment is useful. The ability to thrive in that moment makes you a champion. And the Sixers were able to survive ultimately last night, and we'll see if that's enough to turn their series around. It's the kind of thing where as Embiid goes, is the knee injury that he's dealing with going to get better or worse? The sickness that he's dealing with get better or worse? All the symptoms and everything else he's dealing with, better or worse? Maxey plays 52 minutes in that game last night. Is that something that is going to hinder him when they line it up in Philadelphia for Game 6? He's young. He seemingly has endless energy, but there's only so many 52-minute performances you can put in over a couple of weeks span, or is he going to be spent? And then what is it on the other side? Because the Knicks are obviously uber reliant on Jalen Brunson, who wasn't great in overtime last night. At a couple of he was good. I mean, Brunson was fantastic overall last night, but he does have that turnover late. And unlike the Sixers even, who have multiple scoring options in Tobias Harris and obviously in Embiid, the Knicks, it's kind of Brunson or bust. Like, they do a good job of playing great team basketball, and there's some things they do that I do really like, but there's a reason that I kind of just wrote them off after Julius Randle went out, and it's not because I love Julius Randle. It's just in the playoffs, having another guy that can go get you 30 or that can create a shot in a big situation and not reliant on, Josh Hart, all due respect, who's a fantastic role player, but like, he can't be your second best option in the clutch. And that's kind of where the Knicks are, especially because Bogdanovich got hurt. And so what you see last night is, coming together, the Sixers have just enough. Like, Embiid makes a couple of plays, and then Maxey has an all-timer playoff performance. And I don't know what that dude's got to do to get a call late in that game. He's got a play where he just drives to the rim and gets absolutely obliterated. He has the 4-point play, which initially is called a 2 instead of a 3. And you're like, he is 2 feet behind the 3-point line. What are you looking at? And it just doesn't matter because at the end of the day, they're down 97-94, and Maxey does this.
10 seconds left in game 5. Maxey fires. He's got it. Tie game. 8.1 to play.
Iron Eagle on TNT, the call. It just pulls up from the logo. 7 seconds left. This is my shot. What's up? I have gigantic, what fills in the blank, and I'm not ready to go home. And that is why Tyrese Maxey is everything I love and everything I dream about as a basketball player. And I've thought this for like 3 years, watching this dude, even when he was young and he didn't quite know, like his feet weren't underneath him yet, but he was playing in series with Embiid and Harden. And I'm like, that's my favorite dude on the floor. He's the best player out there right now in big moments, which, by the way, Harden is killing it in LA right now. It's kind of a reminder that we shouldn't do stupid things based off small sample sizes, like no one wanting to trade for James Harden. And I was in the group that was like, I don't want James Harden. Turns out you might want James Harden. But the especially this version of James Harden. But Maxey just has this fearlessness and this it's part fearlessness, and it's part he just seems to be immune to pressure. He just it's not even immune. He absorbs and thrives on it. His ability to just continuously go out there and just keep going, to play with a relentless energy that is insane. It's May now. I mean, we're talking about end of April, full season. You're in the playoffs. It's game 5. You played almost every minute. You have a massive defensive burden because, while Nick Batum was taking a lot of possessions on Jalen Brunson, like he did take some of those, Maxey did, whether by design or by switch. And on a night when Embiid just didn't have it offensively, like it was on him. And he just found ways to put pressure on the defense. And even when things didn't go his way, and this is the thing that I love the most, is how many guys complain, shut it down, and just like mentally can't handle not getting the game officiated their way. He didn't complain once. Like, of course, complain being a key word here, right? Depending on how you want to talk about it. Like, did he yell at the refs when he didn't get a call? Yeah, but it's not like he didn't stay there. He wasn't whining about it. He's like, yo, what the hell? And he kept on going. And he's like, fine, I'll fix it myself. And that mental toughness, that stick-to-itiveness, that fortitude to keep going on top of the athleticism, the speed, the willingness to use it, the ability to, and again, willingness to get downhill. Tyrese Maxey can get a step-back 3 whenever he wants because he's so fast and so jittery that defenses jump at him when he drives. So if he takes a jab step towards the basket on a live dribble and then pulls it back, he's going to have space because teams are going to defenders are going to try to cut off his drive. And yet he still does not settle for that shot. But he's a great shooter, and he shows you with that 3 late. He's the kind of player that, he's the guy that I would want to build around. And I don't know that he's good enough to be the best player on a championship team, but like when you talk about building around people in the way that, for instance, the Wizards do, he's the kind of person that I want to be one of the best players and the example setter on my team. He's just play hard all the time, everything you want in a competitor. And to watch that shine at Madison Square Garden on the biggest stage in an elimination game, it's the best of sports. To me, that is what sports is about at its absolute best, is watching the most competitive guy on the floor use that competitiveness as an advantage because he just outwills his opponent and just refuses to die. And that was Tyrese Maxey last night. For the Sixers, they head to Game 6 later on this week. Plenty of other playoff action we can talk about as well, but let's get you in on this, whether it's on Knicks Sixers last night or any other thoughts on the NBA playoffs. 301-230-0980. Howard Beck will join the conversation at 4:30, but talking to you about the NBA playoffs next at 301-230-0980. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. We are streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980. Go double check the chat, see what's going on there. In the commercial breaks, there's sometimes there's two shows happening. If you watch on YouTube, there's whatever I'm doing, and then people in the chat have their own kind of show going. And sometimes I go check out that show in the break, and I'm like, wow, this is entertaining. I don't know how we got here, but y'all have fun over there on the sidebar. But anyway, you can always watch the show on YouTube. Or if you want to check anything out, you catch part of a segment or you hear me say something on your drive home, and you're like, I want to check that out later. We chop up the show in pieces on YouTube, all the best segments, all the big interviews, and we post them up by the next day. So you can always subscribe at the Team 980 and at Craig Hoffman for the show on demand. And, of course, the Hoffman Show podcast, the entire show on demand at your fingertips. NBA playoffs continue tonight with a pair of game fives. You have Miami, Boston, and Dallas, LA. Miami, Boston, this would be huge for Boston to just get this done tonight. They're at home. They're up 3-1. And Kristaps Porzingis is expected to miss a minimum of several games with the right soleus strain. So your soleus, put my little trainer hat on, is a muscle that kind of sits between what you think of as your calf muscle and your Achilles. Your Achilles, the big tendon at the bottom of your leg, made famous by Achilles, Greek mythology, in case anyone is into that kind of thing. But then above it, you're from the iliac. That's right, Metal Chris. Yeah, see, didn't know you were a scholar. Would you consider yourself a Greek scholar? Fair enough. Basically the same thing. Different. Wrong mic.
The wrong mic. Yeah.
There you go.
There we go. No, I know this stuff because of metal, man. There's a lot of mythology in different metal, just all kinds. Greek, Norse, Egyptian, all that stuff. So
Maybe later in the show we'll do a mythology with Metal Chris segment. Just see what I know that Achilles is Greek. You know who else is Greek? Giannis, but that's a different series.
Yeah.
But Kristaps Porzingis, not Greek. He's expected to miss a minimum of several games with that right soleus strain. So again, that calf muscle. That's according to Woj on Tuesday. The Celtics star big man will be out for Game 5 tonight, and then there is no timetable for his return on the long term. Obviously, he was tremendous this year. He was tremendous last year when he was here, and the rest of the league got to figure out that he's still very good at basketball as he went to Boston and led them to far and away the best record in the Eastern Conference, the best record in the NBA. And it's the kind of thing where, how many games does he miss? Well, if it's multiple could be, 4, or it could be 2, or, obviously it could be a different number, but every game they don't have to play against Miami is one less that he misses. And one less game that another player has to take on extra minutes. And so if they can just get it done, which they have more than enough to do tonight, then they're just in much better shape moving forward, and Porzingis can rest. There's no worry to rush back. Cleveland, Orlando is now at 3-2, so the Cavs have a chance to close it out in Orlando, but home teams have been dominating that series, and so we'll see ultimately if they can, especially if the Magic can come back and force a Game 7 and Boston wins tonight. That's huge, huge, huge for the Celtics to not have to play a Game 1 until early next week, where Porzingis has more time to rest without time elapsing in terms of games that need to be played. Meanwhile, tonight, you've got Mavs and Clippers, which has been just a phenomenal series. And it's a series that's been defined by these massive swings within games. And it's just hard to get a feel for it because there's been no consistency. It's tied at 2-2. The Clippers have gone on massive runs. The Mavs have gone on massive runs. Last game, the Mavs went on this, erased a 31-point lead. It wasn't a whatever run, but over the course of 2 quarters, and by the time they were in the fourth, they're up, take the lead after being down 31. And then, the Clippers come back and James Harden hits floater after floater and closes it out. So it's just hard to predict because Kawhi Leonard out again, which seems to be the easiest thing to predict. Hey, it's the playoffs. Kawhi Leonard's not going to be there. But now Luka Doncic has declared himself ready to play, but acknowledged that he would not be playing or probably not be playing on a sprained knee if it was in the regular season. Quote, not good, could be way better, but it is what it is. Later quoted as saying, I'm fine, I'll be ready for the game. So he's sick, he's got an illness, and he's got this knee injury. And so if he can't be at his best, obviously massive advantage to the Clippers, who have been able to find great chemistry and enough in spurts from Harden, from Paul George, who each had 30-plus in their Game 4 win. Russell Westbrook still doing Russell Westbrook things, being super active and involved off the bench. Terrence Mann's played very well. So there's just so much there, and I just don't think Dallas has the offense without Doncic playing really well. Now, that said, because of Doncic's ability to just manipulate space, he might be fine without this team. It's not like he relies on explosive athleticism. He relies on angles and the fact that he's an enormous human being who bumps people out of the way, and he can still do a lot of that stuff. But from an energy standpoint and from an execution standpoint, like, does the knee injury make it so he's uncomfortable and has a few extra turnovers or misses a few extra shots? Or does the illness prevent him from playing as many minutes because he's tired? Or if he's playing that many minutes, is he tired and thus not as effective? This game's in L.A., it also is one of the things where if I'm Jason Kidd and I'm down 31, I don't know that I waste a bunch of energy on a big comeback. Like, all right, we'll just go get him in Game 6 and try again in Game 7. I'm going to put Luka down for the game. So definitely going to be interesting to watch the strategy tonight in those games. To wrap up quickly, last night, again, Cavs and Magic played a thriller. Cavs win 104-103. Overcome a really, really poor second quarter where they only scored 15 points. Paolo Banchero's having a bit of a coming out party in these playoffs, as if his entire season hasn't been a coming out party. I mean, everyone knew he was awesome as a rookie, but really just taking his game to a whole new level. 39 points, 8 boards, 4 assists last night, but did have 5 turnovers for the Magic rookie. Meanwhile, on the other side of it, really balanced attack from Cleveland. Strus has 16, 5 guys in double digits. Marcus Morris has 12. Strus has 16. Donovan Mitchell, 28. Darius Garland, 23. Mobley's got 14 points, 3 rebounds, 2 blocks, including a big one late to get Cleveland ahead in that series 3-2. And then late night last night, which is a wacky bit. The Sixers and Knicks are going to have to deal with this coming up for Game 6. They're making it like a 9 p.m. start for TV. That's so rude. Just because there's no West Coast game, it's one thing if it's like Memphis I guess Memphis is in the Western Conference, but like this is the problem with the geography of the NBA. You have Western Conference teams all the way into the Mississippi River. And so if there's no Western Conference game to put on in the late TV window, Eastern Conference game gets screwed. Like starting a game at 9 o'clock is absurd. Why are you doing that to the players? And you're like, get over it. They're professionals. Yeah, they are. And like they'll deal with it. But one, I hate it as a viewer. It's way too late. I'm not trying to stay up till midnight to watch Knicks Sixers. But also, like, it's for an athlete, like, routine is everything. And have to shift everything that dramatically in the biggest game of your season sucks. And just, like, think of what you're doing at 9 p.m. Like, you're winding down for your day. They got to ramp. Like, that's when they got to start peaking. And you're out there playing basketball till 11 p.m. It's like, it's the NBA. Figure it out. Got enough TV channels now. But, yeah, the Bucks last night, in that late start, 115-92, thrashed the Pacers. Tyrese Halliburton had a bad one, 16 points, 6 assists. Really, that's like half of his averages. Middleton, Portis with 29. What a bounce-back game for the former Wizard, Bobby Portis. 29 points the game after he got ejected. And now Giannis and Dame might be back for Game 6. So it's just kind of a lesson, like the same thing for the Knicks, kind of going back to where we started, full circle here. If you are a team with a chance to eliminate another team, and that other team is having health issues, do not give them a chance to get their guys back. Do not give Joel Embiid's knee another 2 days to feel better. Like, figure out how to get that job done. And now we'll see if that comes back and bites the Pacers in the butt. Did the Knicks win? Did the Knicks lose it? Sixers win it? That classic question, plus something Josh Harris and the Sixers ownership is doing that I don't know that I've seen before in the NBA. We'll talk to it about talk about it all with Howard Beck from The Ringer next. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app, streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980. Our pleasure to welcome back to the show our guy Howard Beck, of course, basketball writer for a bunch of different publications, but now has landed at The Ringer where he's doing fantastic work all playoffs long and been doing it all season long. Howard, how we doing, man?
Craig, good to talk to you. How are you?
I'm good. I'm excited to talk about a little basketball. I feel like I've been in an NFL draft wormhole the last 4 months, and the Wizards have not given us much to talk about. So now I emerge from that wormhole. I get to talk playoffs. It's a good day. And, you know, Sixers and Knicks certainly gave us a lot of entertainment last night. I'm going to ask you the most sports radio-y of questions. But as you watched that game last night, is that a Sixers found a way to win it, or is that the kind of thing where if you're the Knicks, you're like, damn, we blew that?
I mean, those things are always going to go hand in hand, and we make these, possibly shallow-ish judgments or just based on our own impressions sometimes. Like, did they take it from them? Like, oh, sure. Like, you can always – every team that loses a game like that is going to point to, well, we shouldn't have fouled here, or maybe we had a slow rotation, or we shouldn't have put this guy in at this time. We should have called this time. And, like, it's always true, right? Like, there's always – the team that loses is always going to feel like there's something they could have done to prevent it. And they're probably right, especially when it's two teams that are, I think, as closely matched in a series that's as closely matched as this one. Like, these teams are very, very close, I think in large part because Embiid's not himself, right? 100% Embiid would tip the balance between these two teams. Of course, the Knicks could counter that, if they had Julius Randle and they were closer to 100%, maybe they're better. But in terms of that game last night, and by the way, I should just note, you know how close this series is? The Sixers have a cumulative advantage of 2 points through 5 games. Like that's the cumulative score is +2 for the Sixers over 5 games. It's insane. I think I'm going to lean Sixers took it just because of the kinds of shots that it required for Tyrese Maxey specifically to make. The degree of difficulty, the timing, the clutchness, all of it. And like he has just had, I don't want to say it's a revelation because like he's been bursting into stardom over the last, year plus, but the postseason is always bigger and the gravity of those shots is just that much higher. And I just think that was Maxey's night. Ultimately, that's how I'll remember that game was what Tyrese Maxey did to the Knicks, less so than what the Knicks might have done to allow it.
No, I'm 100% with you. And I think last year during the playoffs especially, you watch Maxey and you're just like, this guy's way better than I think we all are thinking that he is. At least people that were checking in, maybe on the Sixers that don't watch them with frequency. But as you talk to people around the league and maybe even folks within the Sixers, like when did they realize that they had not just like, oh, hey, we got a later draft pick that isn't bad. We got someone who's like top 3 player on a championship team level good.
It's hard to know with these things, right? Like I think about it through the lens of like Jokic too, right? Where the Nuggets draft him in the second round and, was like, let's take a flyer on this guy. And like, when do you know? Like, I think the teams know when the rest of us know. Usually it's like sometimes it's a brief flash, or like there's a game or a practice or whatever where you start to see a guy really make a leap before it's evident to the rest of the world. I don't know that happened in Maxey's case. And the thing was, I think everybody, including within the Sixers, could see this emergence coming even a year ago. And look, even his second season in the league, this is his 4th year. So second year in the league, he's already 17 points per game on decent efficiency. And the passing is there, and you could like the speed, the burst is clearly there, and all that. But then last year, he's got to navigate, James Harden, and and that had been the way Max. That had been Maxey's kind of like. There's the security blanket of it, but there's also the lack of opportunity if you've got a James Harden. I think for me, the curiosity I had coming into the season was, okay, James Harden is gone. We've seen Maxey flirt with all-star type play, but it's different when you're now the guy. And obviously Joel Embiid's the guy, but when you are the guy with the ball in your hands as a point guard with all the responsibility that comes with it and no James Harden to share that with, the game is in your hands, and what do you do with that? And I think Maxey had such a great season. I think if you wondered whether he could be just a great secondary ball handler and even like the third guy behind Harden and Embiid, could he be a primary spotlight player? I don't know that anybody really knew that until they traded James Harden and gave the keys to Maxey this season.
Howard Beck of The Ringer is with us here on the Hoffman Show. I mean, that's the thing that's also so impressive is like last year, like you said, he kind of has this moment where Harden is still there, but late in games, you're like, oh, I feel more comfortable if I'm the Sixers with Maxey having the ball. And then last night, there's Joel's not having a great night offensively. We know he's under the weather. There's a million reasons why he is not 100%. But Maxey's willingness, because there's so many guys in the league that are like, well, I'm just going to keep feeding Joel. And like, I don't want to step on his toes. And this is in some level a credit to Joel for having the humility to play with a guy like Maxey and be like, nah, dude, go. But what do you make of the fact that he was willing to, the fearlessness and also the feel for the game to realize that he was the one who needed to save them?
Yeah, and that's part of why when you asked the initial question about, like, did the Sixers win it, did the Knicks lose it, like, I think it's more about the Sixers winning it and Tyrese Maxey, seizing the moment. And it's really interesting. Like, every player, every star kind of has their own way of moving into these moments, right? And I think with Maxey, it's reminding me in a way completely different stylistically, but in a way of Steph Curry, where there's a joy behind it. Like, he smiles a lot. He's having fun, and it's not kind of the old school, like, I'm going to rip your throat out. Like, he did rip the Knicks' hearts out last night and their fans' hearts out, and I was at the Garden to see and hear that. But it's not in that kind of, like, alpha dog pit bull kind of way. It's more like, I'm out here just having a great time and doing what I do best. And I think that's part of what makes him such a magnetic player and personality too. And why, unless, even for Knicks fans, and I was texting with some of my Knicks fan friends last night, like they were like, they can't dislike him. They're just blown away. They're impressed. Like they hate it. But Maxey just earned everybody's respect. And I think that's the ultimate.
You know who's going to be psyched about that analogy, Howard, is my wife. Because we were watching the game last night, and I was raving about Maxey, and Steph has been my favorite player of the last decade and a half because of the joy thing. And she goes, I know why you like him. It's because he's like Steph. And now she's going to think that she should go write about professional basketball. So thanks for that.
Sure, for sure. You married a smart woman, obviously. But listen, I think, again, Maxey dominates the game differently than Steph does, right? Like very, very, like they're not nearly the same player, other than they both are nominally point guards and can shoot some and whatever. But like they're very, very different. I just think that the way a star player in the NBA galvanizes a team, and there are different ways of doing it. Galvanizes a team, galvanizes a fan base, pulls you in, pulls even in the casual fan. Like if you're somebody who just walked in the room for the first time and didn't know who Tyrese Maxey was, you'd watch and you'd go, "Yeah, that guy's really fun to watch." And partially it's the things he can do, and partially it's the demeanor with which he does them, right? And so I don't know, it's a really fascinating aspect just of him, and I think of NBA stars.
Howard Beck from the Ringers with us. Two more quick Sixers things. If they obviously would have to pull off 3 in a row here to come back and win this series. So if they were to not do that and they ultimately do lose, where does that leave them? Because Maxey's having this moment and has proven this year of the caliber of player that he is. We know that Joel's getting closer to 30. He was having literally one of the best seasons we've seen in decades until the point that he got hurt this year. Like the types of numbers that efficiency-wise can only be matched by those historical seasons where Wilt Chamberlain averaged 50 a game. Like that's literally how, as I'm sure you know, Howard, like how productive he was being, but hurt again. And here we are in April and they're on the brink of elimination. So where does that leave the Sixers if they can't pull off this comeback?
It's interesting because before they won last night, and even after they won, there was a lot of just noise I was hearing. This is obviously not within the league. This is more like fans and media and others, but could this be Embiid's last game with the Sixers? Is this the end of the process? And I'm like, I'm actually a little stunned by that narrative or that conversation, that even curiosity, or just as a talking point. I know that Embiid has, certainly had a polarizing run with the Sixers, and Sixer fans not sure what to make of him, and they may be a little split on him because he's always getting hurt. And then, he makes the comments the other night about, because the Knicks fans had kind of invaded their arena, and he's disappointed that the Sixer fans weren't there in higher numbers. I've talked to some people just in Philly media who tell me there are a lot of Philly fans who have kind of checked out on this team, or just not sold on them. And it would account for why some of those tickets were available for Knicks fans to snatch up. And so I get it, but listen, the guy is a year removed from winning MVP. As you just noted, he was actually even playing better this season. He actually was improving on his MVP season noticeably, and would have won a second one in a row, I think, if he'd stayed healthy. And yes, injury-racked career and a frustrating career, but the guy's incredible. You just don't find guys like that very often. And if you were to trade him, there are teams that would love to have him, and I think you could probably get a boatload for him. But I don't know. I haven't thought for a second that was the logical conclusion to any of this, no matter what happened. Because if they lose this series, it's largely because Embiid was, still rehabbing from the knee, and on top of that had the Bell's palsy to deal with. He's not nearly 100%. And the Sixers kind of held off on trying to make massive improvements to the roster because they were saving cap room for this summer. And they're going to go into this summer with Embiid, Maxey, and a boatload of cap room and a lot of flexibility to do things. Whether that means they steal Paul George from the Clippers, whether it means that they acquire somebody in trade into that cap room. A lot of teams this summer are coming up against it really hard because of the new CBA and all the second apron and all these restrictions, players are going to be available that teams are just going to have to almost, I don't want to say dump, but they're going to have to make some sacrifices just to deal with CBA issues, and the Sixers will be in a great position to take advantage. So if I were the Sixers, the cool-headed view is I have a guy who's 1 year removed from MVP, who is one of the top 5 to 7 players in the league. I've got another guy in Maxey who's just coming into stardom, young, great, exciting, and I've got room to add around them. I'm not moving one of my stars. So no, I don't think this is the end, but I've been wrong before.
Yeah, no, I mean, that makes total sense to me. And it's the kind of thing that a guy like Josh Harris at the top would plan for. And obviously Daryl Morey would plan for because they have such a good feel for this. Speaking of Harris, who obviously is of a much local interest here in D.C. as he now owns the Commanders as well, he and some of his ownership partners are buying 2,000 tickets to Game 6 and distributing them to local Philly community leaders and first responders, et cetera, et cetera. Have you ever seen anything like this before, and why do you think that Harris and company are doing it?
I have not ever seen this before. I'm not saying it's never happened. It's possible, but Knicks fans took over. I mean, takeover is a little bit strong, but pretty darn close to taking over the Sixers arena in Game 4, and it was so noticeable. I was not at that game, but you could hear it on the TV, and certainly the players noticed, and Joel Embiid, complained about it afterward. Sixer fans, looking to make a profit on their tickets, can't begrudge them. But if it's on the secondary market and New York is close enough to, make that commute, but that's embarrassing for the franchise and for the team, and it's uncomfortable, and especially in an intense sports market like Philly for that to happen. So that the Sixers themselves are buying up 2,000 tickets. It's not entirely clear to me if they're buying them off the secondary market themselves to just make sure that they're not available to Knicks fans, or if these were tickets that had been previously unsold, which defies reason. I can't imagine, no matter how Sixer fans feel about the Sixers right now, I can't imagine that there were 2,000 seats just available. So my assumption is that they were buying them off the secondary market to preempt Knicks fans from buying them up. And then they're going to give them to a variety of groups within Philly. So smart move if you're trying to avoid having your arena sound like Madison Square Garden. But, yeah, really weird.
Yeah, no, I didn't even – when you said the secondary market thing, I was just like, oh, they probably have some amount of tickets that they're not selling. There's probably some weird financial thing. I didn't realize that would be where they would go. It's literally I just imagine some person who works for the Harris Blitzer Group being on StubHub now with a company credit card being like, you sure? They're marked up a lot.
I mean, that was – I could be wrong, and I have not made a call. I have not asked the Sixers about this, so I'm making some assumptions. But, yeah, I just figured it was kind of that. Yeah,
makes sense to me. You're right. It's a playoff game.
Said, yeah.
How many tickets are available?
We'll take them all.
Yeah, that's wild. Howard Beck with us from The Ringer. I know on your latest podcast appearance, you guys talked quite a bit about the Suns, and I remember having you on last year as we were headed towards the exit of Beal here in D.C. He winds up in Phoenix, and I just was like, why would you do that if you're Phoenix? And a year later, I look very smart on that. But we are just a year in, Howard, and that's kind of what I wanted to ask you is year one unquestionably did not go as the Suns had hoped in any matter of way. Regular season, those guys barely played together. Those guys, of course, being Beal, Booker, and Durant. But they're obviously going to, I would assume, run it back again and see if they can be better in year two. How do they make it better, or was this a one-and-done type of experiment?
To answer the first question of how do they make it better, nobody knows. They're nobody knows the answer to that, and they're going to have to figure that out very quickly here, and I'm not sure if they can. And the reason for that is, as I mentioned earlier, the NBA is operating under a new collective bargaining agreement that went in a year or so ago, and the biggest restrictions are now just coming into effect. And when you have a payroll as high as theirs with 3 stars making as much as they are, it becomes nearly impossible to use the usual methods to add more talent. It gets really, really hard. They have zero flexibility. They've traded away almost all of their draft capital, first to get Durant and then other moves since then. They're really hemmed in. This seems like one of the most impossible situations I've seen. And I think it's very, very reasonable, and this is not an overreaction. It is very reasonable, given Durant's age, given them being swept in the first round, given everything there, that maybe this should be one and done. That maybe they should just say, you know what, we gave it our best shot, we went all in, it blew up in our faces, and the only way to recover from this is to trade Kevin Durant now. And if you trade Kevin Durant, it opens the door to Booker maybe wanting out too. But you know, the way you'd want to go is to trade Beal, but that's a near impossibility.
Can confirm from Washington, Howard. Can confirm from the District of Columbia that trading Bradley Beal is very difficult.
Well, and almost more so now, right?
Yeah, because he still has the no-trade clause, if I'm not mistaken. Like, that went with him.
Clause, yeah, it does not go away. They could have negotiated it out as part of the deal, but they didn't, which I think also was foolish. So he still has the no-trade clause. But I would say this, and I said this on the Real Ones podcast earlier this week, even if the no-trade clause didn't exist, I just don't think Bradley Beal is tradable because he's making $50 million a year, and in a few years from now, he's still going to be making $57 million. And you just in an ever-tightening system, that same concern of having a guy making 50-something million, but who can't play more than 50 games in a season because he's always getting hurt, like it's just he's not worth the bang for the buck, and it's a multi-year deal, and it's only going higher. Like, who's trading for Bradley Beal's contract even if he doesn't have a no-trade clause? I just don't see it. This is the worst possible time to have one of those albatross-type contracts. Like, I know in the past it's always like, you'll never be able to trade Gilbert Arenas, or you'll never be able to trade whoever, and these contracts always get traded anyway. I think this might be the one to finally be like this is peak untradeable contract. I think they are stuck with Beal. And if that's the case, and if you think that this trio has failed and is not going to be able to move the ball forward at all next year, and I don't see how they can, then you have to consider trading the other guys.
No, that was my thing for Phoenix in the first place. I was like, this feels like a bad idea. And obviously it seems like there was some consternation within the organization about the fit of those guys and just kind of the lack of, like, it just, hey, let's get the all-star team together and it'll work itself out, which is typically what happens is like someone will convince themselves, but with what Brad's history has been now for years. And the other thing, and this is where we'll wrap, Howard, is kind of the state of the league is so interesting is one word, weird is another right now, where you've got this young and up-and-coming group of stars in Edwards and Halliburton and kind of the 25, Zion, if he can stay healthy as he did for 70 games this year for the first time, this up-and-coming sub-25 class. And obviously Curry and LeBron on the way out who have dominated the league for the last 2 decades. And then you've got a weird middle tier where Jokic seems to be emerging, and maybe he wins another one, and you're like, oh, well, this was the Nikola Jokic era. Why didn't we realize that more in real time? And then Giannis is kind of the other guy in that, anywhere between 25, 35 age group that's got a shot. And the Bucks seem to be a disaster of all kinds right now, although if they can pull this off, who knows if Dame and Giannis can get back for a Game 6 and Game 7. But it just seems like there is almost a weird vacuum, and thus maybe not as many teams who are like, oh, I'll convince myself that I'm the team that can fix Brad Beal, because teams are either kind of set and on their path or are just kind of accepting their fates at this point and maybe even rebuilding, and there's not as many teams that feel like they're one piece away.
Yeah, I memean, this has been an age of parity, 5 straight champions without repeating and all that stuff. And we've got, all in the Western Conference in particular, all these teams that seemed really close. But then, the playoffs start and it's like Timberwolves sweep, and granted Zion, Timberwolves sweep, and granted the Suns are kind of wonky. And then the Pelicans got swept, and granted Zion wasn't playing. And we've had some lopsided series, but we do have a lot of teams with a lot of talent where it feels really close, and it makes teams tempted, I think, to make maybe riskier moves. I don't know. I don't know what to make of it exactly. I feel like this summer is going to be kind of a resettling a little bit, where, especially in the West, it's going to be really hard for teams to break in to that top group because the Nuggets are so good. The Thunder, the Timberwolves, and they're all young enough and under contract. Those teams aren't going anywhere. And we've got these older teams where, the Warriors are built around older players, and so are the Lakers, and so are the Suns, of course, the Clippers. And so some of this may just sort itself out, and that the parity may start to ebb, and we might see more of a traditional alignment as guys age out. But we just have older stars who are still really effective, a lot of young talent, and and it makes it tough for the decision makers because it's like, is this a year where we're supposed to be all in? Are we chasing a playoff bid? Or are we like the Jazz are a really interesting position, right? Like, are they trying to keep adding around Markkanen, or should they be trading Markkanen and saying, you know what, we're not breaking into this for a while. It gets too crowded. Let's play the long game. And I don't know. I don't know what the right answer there is.
Yeah, and shame on me for not saying SGA, obviously, is one of the young stars who's emerging as the Thunder swept and have just are on to the second round. Yeah, it's a fascinating time in the league, and a few people that I'd rather talk about it with than Howard Beck, of course, with The Ringer. You can catch him on their podcast. You can read his work on their site, and was in New York last night to see the Tyrese Maxey show. Howard, always great to chat, my friend. We'll do it again here in the next couple of weeks as the playoffs march on.
Always a pleasure, Craig. Thanks, man.
You got it. That is Howard Beck with us, ladies and gentlemen, here on the Hoffman Show. When we get back here on the Team 980, get back to the Commanders. Ben Standig joins us on the draft and where the Commanders go next. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app, and we are streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980. 5:30 today, we talked to a TCU insider about Brandon Coleman, the third-round pick for the Commanders. How comfortable would he be watching the guy that he's watched for a couple years play tackle in the NFL? But let's get the Commander side of it right now with our guy Ben Standig. It is time for Not My Beat.
Today's top story from the perspective of someone who's there.
You are looking live.
This just in.
Not My Beat.
Of course, you know Ben, the Commanders beat reporter for The Athletic. Standig, what's up, my guy? How are you?
Craig, I am doing well. Thanks for having me. It's nice to finally get past the draft and remember what it's like to sleep for more than a few hours, so pretty happy.
I was going to ask, because I definitely was pretty dead earlier in the week, and kind of today I was like, oh, I feel alive again. Like, kind of. I'm not back to 100%, but I know how being on the beat is for the draft itself, being out there in Ashburn. Do you, like, what percent is Ben Standig Wednesday after the draft?
Well, I don't think I've been over 60% in years at this point, but yeah, I mean, again, somewhat first world problems. Nobody cry a river of tears for me or my colleagues, but yeah, I mean, obviously the drafts are late nights, and in this case, when you have 6 picks in the first 100. My place wants a lot of stuff on a lot of the early picks, so there was a lot to do. But I would say in general, and this applies for really all of us, the Monday after the draft, I genuinely would say is the first time since the Dan Snyder harassment stories, popped up for real back in the summer of 2020. It's the first time I think we've all been able to take a legit breath since then, because it's been, as we know, one thing after another. And even after Josh Harris bought the team, it was immediately on to the season. And then it became, who's he going to hire a GM and coach? And they signed 800 free agents. So, yeah, it actually Monday kind of was a monumental moment in terms of not just covering this team, but following it, talking about it. I think it's a real thing.
Yeah, no, without a doubt. I was actually talking with our boss earlier today about this, and we're kind of now looking ahead. It's like, what are we going to talk about the next couple of months? And last year, there was still the sale to talk about, and it dominated so much of the conversation. Is like, how difficult was Dan going to be on the way out? Like, could the Harris group get it across the finish line? By this point, I think we knew, or we were getting close to knowing, that it was definitely going to be Harris. So it's definitely weird to just kind of wake up and be like, oh, we kind of get a couple weeks here till rookie minicamp. Of course, there's no lack of excitement, though. Jaden Daniels, ultimately the pick at 2. As people start talking a little bit more now that everything's over, have you learned anything more about the Commanders' pursuit of Daniels and ultimately why they settled on him at 2 and how difficult or not of a decision it was for them?
Well, I mean, Peters, after all this silence, after all this speculation, tells us after the draft, oh, yeah, we kind of knew for a while. It's like, buddy, come on. Getting to throw somebody a bone here to have us all stand down a little bit. Yeah, I mean, look, they did their homework. And, if you're starting with sort of last year's tape, it's going to be pretty hard to not fall for Daniels. In talking to some different people around the league before the draft and then certainly after, everybody seems to point to that Florida game, the one that Daniels himself mentioned when he was asked as a response to something Adam Peters said, like, what's it like to take the soul out of a defense, and he points specifically to that Florida game last year where he had just preposterous numbers. I don't know if that's the game itself that put Peters and crew over the top, but it certainly didn't hurt the cause. He's a playmaker. I think, look, we're going to learn a lot more about him as we all go through this, but, his athleticism is the obvious part, but I think his intellect, his feel for the game, his understanding of what a defense is doing and how the play call fits in with that, I think is going to probably be a part that we'll end up talking more about going forward, or at least that's something that people have emphasized to me, over the last few days.
Ben Standing with us, of course, from The Athletic. So we can just kind of go through the picks at large here, Ben, or the picks pick by pick, I should say. Jerzon Newton goes second for Washington. They couldn't believe he was still there. I was pretty surprised he was. I'm sure that you then started scouring the league, kind of asking that question as you talked to your connects around the league. How surprised were they, and what reasons do you think or why Jerzon Newton fell out of the first round and to the delighted arms of Adam Peters at pick 36?
Yeah, as somebody who pays attention to things like mock drafts, I try to always get a feel for a guy like, for any of these players in terms of like where they're going to go in the first round. And I wasn't projecting Newton to Washington because, for the obvious reasons, even though I've been talking about like they're making their choices for 2024, it's still hard to say, okay, but take a defensive tackle with your second pick when you have Allen and Payne and, obviously. But when it got to the top of the second round, that I was like, I'm not going to be surprised at all if he's there because there was, not that there wasn't talk of first round possibility for some of the other players, but, at that point, all bets are off. I think people around the league, it's a little bit of a mixed bag. Like, I didn't talk to anybody who was like, what a steal. It was more like, yeah, he's good. They're not necessarily surprised he fell out of the first. He was in mock drafts generally in sort of that 28 to, starting around 28. There was some, talk about Miami at 21, but I think that was maybe a lot of they have a need. Let's fill the need for them, rather than necessarily being an accurate depiction of where his value was. So I think people like him. There's some, squatty body kind of concerns a little bit. And I don't know how much this current Jones fracture injury matters, but it's a good pick. I get totally why they did it, but it wasn't like I think, look, if Peters is happy, I don't know where he was on his board, but like in general, from the outside perspective, it wasn't like crazy that he was there at 36, but it's, hey, he's there. They like him. And they said, we're going to, go ahead, even though it's not like our biggest need in 2024.
Right. And then this is the fun part, right? We get to find out over the next bunch of years, like, was Adam Peters right to think that everyone else was nuts, or is Adam Peters the sucker here and everyone else was right to pass on him in the first round for whatever reason? That's the fun of this. And sometimes if you're Adam Peters, you drafted Trey Lance, and sometimes if you're Adam Peters, you drafted George Kittle. So hopefully, obviously for Commanders fans, it's on the Kittle side of that scale. For Newton, when it comes to the what does this mean for John Allen question, what's your answer to that?
Yeah, I've been harping on this for a long time now because he no longer has any guaranteed money left on the last 2 years of his deal. Next year, his deal, it's like a $23 million cap hit, which is, really, relatively speaking, an unsustainable number unless he just has a completely monster season. And, last year was not his best year, probably partly because of some injuries. But, it's going to be, it does. I won't say it's a definitive answer as to whether they're looking to extend him, but whatever the odds were that was going to happen before, I think that you have to imagine that takes a hit. This is what happened with Darian Mathis, right? Ironically, they were hedging that Daron Payne wasn't going to sign an extension, so they took effectively his replacement in the second round, only for Payne to ball out and Mathis to miss the whole year. So they give Daron the extension, and now we're at the same boat. Is John Allen are they gonna wait? Is he gonna have a monster year? And if he does, then do you feel the need to keep him? So I wouldn't feel I'll say this: if you were looking to go buy a jersey, I wouldn't feel great about buying a 93 if you're looking to wear it beyond this season. With him being on the roster, but at the same time, we'll just have to see how they play it out. Obviously, Allen's a valuable player, so we'll have to see what they do. That's one thing I don't know what you talked about. Almost everybody that was already on the roster, we pretty much have not talked about much at all for the last 3 months, and that's not necessarily our fault. We just haven't had much time with the new regime, and every time we do, we have to talk about the quarterback and all those things. So it'll be interesting to see more what they think of Allen as a building block and a guy they would potentially want to keep.
Yeah, no, I think the current roster thing's interesting, Ben, because they also won't talk about it. Like, you ask them, like, hey, by the way, what do you think of, that you had a chance, what do you think of St. Juice? What do you think of Forbes? What do you think of some of these guys that we would like to know more about? And they give you fairly mealy-mouthed answers because they have the competitive advantage of secrecy right now. We have no idea what they're going to run on both sides of the ball, and we won't until week 1 probably. Like, we'll get some clues during the OTA period, and we'll get some clues during training camp because they have to practice. But I don't think that we're going to see like the full bloom of what they're going to do schematically beyond their base installs until week 1. And then it's going to be a week-by-week thing of like, what other tricks do they have in their bag as they unveil them game plan by game plan. Like, we're going to, I mean, it's actually, if you want to get way ahead of ourselves, like, it's the kind of thing where I call Logan sometime next January and be like, all right, hey, we should do a film review on the season. And by the way, check out what we actually did this year, because we're just going to be chasing it all season. And, if I'm them, I'm not giving up any of that as much as we want to know it.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I had Fred Smoot on my podcast that went up today, and obviously defensive back and all that. And I said, hey, help me out here. Like, they draft Mike Sanders still. He's going to be the slot corner. But then we thought Quan Martin was going to be there. But then you have Jeremy Chin, who's a safety, but maybe they're going to use him more as a linebacker. And, what do we think of obviously St. Juice, I guess, is going back outside. What do you think about Forbes? Like, basically, like, Fred, tell me what the lineup's going to look like. It's 1st and 10. They're playing the Eagles. What are we looking at? He's like, I don't know. But I mean, he's like, I don't know. This is like the big mystery of the whole thing. Now that we've gotten past the mystery of who's the quarterback, now it's, what's the actual team going to look like? And you're right. It's good for them, bad for us.
Yeah, Ben Stadig, who, by the way, you can listen to on the Standing Room Only podcast from The Athletic, and, of course, read his work at theathletic.com or the app. It will, if you try to read it on the website, Ben, and you're on a mobile device, it'll send you to the app. I know, because I do that. Back to Allen, though, real quick. I also wonder what this means for John this year, because I like the way you phrased some things earlier where you're like, they're not drafting for 2024, but like, what does this mean for 2024 on some other guys that we were talking about? But with Newton, I feel like it gives Allen a chance to breathe, and it feels like he couldn't do that the last bunch of years. Like, do you think this could be a resurgent year for John Allen, or are we at a point with what he's gone through injury-wise the last couple of years and the fact that he's creeping up towards 30 that you just you reserve your optimism for somebody else?
Yeah, no, the getting a chance to breathe part is key. I said that they drafted Mathis as a hedge if Deron Payne leaves. He also was, in theory, the replacement for Matt Ioannidis, who had left at that point. Tim Settle left about that point, I think, as well.
Yep.
And those were the two primary backups. Then Mathis misses the whole year, right? And all of a sudden, there's more workload for Allen and Payne. And, it kind of carried into last year, too. Mathis missed some time, still hasn't really shown what he is. They have John Ridgeway. But, yes, with Newton, in theory, that should be a guy who allows them to rest, have more of a real rotation and not have Allen and Payne on the field for, a million percentage plays. Maybe Dan Quinn wants that, but it seems like he's more of a rotation guy. So, yeah, in theory, that should be a help. And again, Allen has 2 years left on his deal, but realistically, one way or the other, this is, I don't want to say it's the final year, but this is the big year. This is the year where it's like, all right, either I'm getting an extension or I'm probably getting released and I got to show the league where I'm at. So, and the fact that they drafted the defensive tackle, maybe there's some extra motivation there. So, yeah, I would imagine, assuming he's healthy, and not to say that John Allen isn't playing hard all the time, but just, there could be a little extra motivation this year with all those circumstances.
No doubt. And you can play a lot harder when you only have to play 65, 70% of snaps versus 85. And that's been John Allen's life the last couple of years. So they then trade out at 40. They pick up 50 and 53. But But I'm curious, for someone who's plugged in as you around the league, what do people make of the intra-division trade thing? Because there are some, fans certainly that care a lot. But do people in the league make a big deal out of the fact that they essentially give the Eagles Cooper DeJean? Obviously, they get quite a bit in return, but they allow that transaction to happen by trading in the division with Philadelphia. How big of a deal is that?
I don't think it's a huge deal. I think quarterback is where it's like, no chance that nobody's doing that. But, a couple years ago, Dallas and Philly made a trade in the top 15. I think that was the deal where ultimately Dallas got Micah Parsons and the Eagles got Devontae Smith, I want to say.
That sounds right.
So those things do happen. And, look, even Peters himself acknowledged, hey, I guess we'll see what happens here with because Cooper DeJean was the pick. But ultimately, you got to do what you got to do. And if they felt this is the right thing, again, that's the thing. It's not quarterback, right? So, whatever Cooper DeJean needs, it's hard to imagine he's swinging the division, right? So, and they obviously think, between the two guys they got, Sanders Still and Ben Sinnott, that, those are guys that they like. And, whether even if DeJean is, say, the best of the three, they jumped up significantly to get to 53 from one of the other picks they traded. So, it was a good move for them to get yet another top 100 pick. But, it's a name that we're going to remember. It's not, sometimes these deals happen and you're like, remind yourself, who did they get? No, this one we're all going to remember because DeJean was a guy that got talked a lot about being a first-round pick. And in one of my mock draft exercises, he was actually a guy that I traded up for Washington as a versatile defensive back that I thought would work for Dan Quinn. So, it's going to be a really interesting one for sure.
What do you think Sinnott tells us about what Cliff wants to do offensively? If Peters is out there making Kyle Juszczyk comparisons, and we've seen him line up all over the place, what do you think that tells us about the offense that Cliff Kingsbury is going to run in 24 and beyond?
Well, it kind of makes me wonder. So, in terms of the quarterback, a lot of people have asked, I'm sure you guys talked about this, that how much influence does Cliff Kingsbury have on that pick? And I was always like, well, can't really be too much ultimately, right? He could be gone by next year. You can't make if let's just say they have a good year and he has a chance to be a head coach in pros or college and he leaves, you can't make a decision off of that. So off of him. So based on that and the fact that Peters is saying that Sinnott reminds him of two guys that he had in San Francisco kind of makes me think he just felt he wanted this kind of a piece. But look, they have not had since basically Logan Thomas in 2020. They really have not had an effective pass catching tight end on this roster in part because Logan Thomas got banged up and Cole Turner hasn't become a thing yet. Armani Rogers got hurt last year and so on. So I just think it gives them another. He's got obviously his crazy versatility that he can play fullback, that he can be an effective pass catcher. Somebody said to me that. Because, depending on what list you looked at, right? Dave Brugler, our guy, had Sinnott as a fourth-round pick and, the sixth tight end overall. I want to say Daniel Jeremiah had him, though, much higher, maybe even a top 50 player. And basically, the way somebody phrased it to me was, if you wanted a guy like Sinnott, you had to take him because he's kind of a one-on-one almost. They're just not guys who have his skill set and abilities and flexibility. So, position flexibility. I think I owe Ron a quarter now for using that term.
Yeah, I've been using positional versatility or just versatility in general. That's code for position flex, except for it's not a bad word.
Right. I have to wean myself off. I'll get dock myself every time I say it. But so I think it was kind of like that because some people thought it was a little bit of early, but again, it's just he's such a unique player, and the need is pretty notable. Again, they just not had much success at that spot. So I don't it's hard to get excited when he's comparing him to Kyle Juszczyk. But at least in terms of skill set, when he's comparing him to Kittle, you're like, all right, well, let's see what happens.
Would you say, I'll come back to Coleman in a second, would you say that's the same for Luke McCaffrey? Because Logan and I actually talked about that, where it feels like if you wanted a big power slot that was willing to block, and for all the other receivers that were on the board, the guys that maybe fit the profile of what they wanted both from a football and a character standpoint were getting kind of slim. They didn't have a fourth rounder. Would you say that same thing applies to, or did you have any conversations with folks around the league about Luke McCaffrey being that same way of a necessary overdraft if you even consider him an overdraft?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of that. I think that makes a lot of sense for sure. Like every time I was doing a mock draft in that 100th pick, I kept landing on Brendan Rice, Gary Rice's son, who obviously ended up going much later. But it was in part because I was like, all right, well, at some point I got to give them some target and somebody with some size. And I just kind of kept landing on him. He just, at least, Dane's draft guide ends up being sort of like a Bible almost last couple of weeks. And he had Rice higher than McCaffrey, I want to say so. But yeah, no, when you don't have a 4th-round pick, when you want a specific skill set and there's just not a ton of them, then yeah, sometimes you have to overdraft. I mean, we've all, this is maybe the one place where us fantasy footballers can relate to an NFL situation. Sometimes you just have to do that. So yeah, I mean, look, McCaffrey's got some good size, a little under 6'2". His 3-cone and quick bursts off the line really stood out among his peers. And needless to say, Peters is going to have more insight into him than probably most teams in the league other than the 49ers, because he was just around. So, I get it. Even if it was a little bit of an overdraft, obviously, hopefully for them it works out. But, yeah, I understand why they did it. And without a 4th, they probably felt, hey, if we want to do this, we have to do it now.
And then last but not least, we're going to talk to someone who covered Brandon Coleman at TCU coming up at 5:30. But, Ben, as you've had conversations with folks talking about Coleman, the 78th pick, of course, for Washington, some people say he's a guard. Some people say he's a tackle. It seems like they're going to try him at tackle. What are folks around the league making of that idea?
Yeah, I mean, I think in general, those who put him at guard, they're like, look, it's not that he can't play tackle. I just think his best path going forward is at guard. Obviously, they're willing to see this play out. He's a huge guy, very athletic. He has, an insane amount of snaps, having playing left tackle in college. So it's not like, that was one of the reasons I kind of questioned the idea of them moving into the 1st round for a tackle, because a guy like Tyler Guyton, a lot of upside, but he has barely played, in college. Whereas Coleman has, 1,400, 1,500, 1,600 snaps under his belt. So, look, he can play some guard. This is where you have to say, okay, this is your evaluation. I'm not going to pretend to be, silly and say, oh, I think you should be a tackle or a guard. That's up to them. But yeah, this is where it'll be interesting. And it's so fascinating because, this is a team that had Brandon Scherf, that had Sam Cosmi, and ultimately had to move them inside. If that's the case, at the 3rd round, that's hardly a big deal. It's just that right now for this team, left tackle is such a question mark. And not that I would expect Coleman to start, maybe not even until midway through the season, but if even then. But if he's ultimately proven to be more of a guard, if that's where they come out of, the summer thinking, then, yeah, that left tackle spot is even more in question for some. I mean, I'm not as fretting about it as others, though I understand the Jane Daniels part of it. But, yeah, that's going to be really fascinating to see if they're right on their evaluation that he is a tackle ultimately.
If Sheriff was 1st and Cosmi was 2nd, maybe 3rd time's the charm, Ben. I think after all that we've been through, to take this conversation full circle, we deserve that. We deserve a left tackle.
Oh, boy, I think we deserve a little more than that. I like to think we deserve Hawaii, but okay, I guess we can take the left tackle, sure.
We'll take what they give us, man, considering all that we've been through. Ben Standig covered it all for The Athletic. Great stuff, as always, man. I hope you get a little bit of rest between having to call into our shows and whatever your bosses at The Athletic have you doing. And we'll see you in a couple weeks for rookie minicamp and OTAs. It'll be here before we want it to be.
Absolutely. Craig, appreciate it, man. We'll talk soon.
Absolutely. That's Ben Standig, everybody. And, of course, you can also check out his podcast, Standig Room Only, wherever you get your pods. The host of the Locked On Horned Frogs podcast, TCU Watcher, is going to join us next. What's his take on Brandon Coleman, and what more can he tell us about a remarkable story coming out of TCU, headed to D.C. here on the Team 980? It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app and streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980. You'll hear from Brandon Coleman, the 78th pick in the 2024 NFL Draft, Coming up before the end of the show, he joined Chris Russell earlier today, as did the Commanders' fifth-round pick, Jared McGee. But right now, we'll get some more insight on Coleman, who might be one of, outside of Jaden Daniels, the most key players in this draft class. And we'll get it from Steven Simcox, who hosts the Locked On Horned Frogs podcast down there in Fort Worth. Steven, welcome to the show. Thank you for your time.
Thanks for having me on, Craig. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. So his story, Brandon Coleman's story, is remarkable. Just didn't play football until like his junior year in high school, has to go to a junior college. Like, when did you guys realize that you had something special down there in Fort Worth and that this dude was a really, really good football player?
It probably wasn't until his second year on campus. I mean, you laid out his story pretty well there. He came from Germany. His father was in the military, so he played basketball growing up. He gets to Texas, ends up kind of getting thrown in the football mix because of his size. And after spending some time at the JUCO level, he comes in and starts in 2020, but that was the pandemic-shortened year, so only played in a few games, dealt with some injuries. And then in 2021, he started at guard, and by the time TCU went on their great run in the 2022 season, he was their starting left tackle and did an outstanding job. But, I mean, as far as I don't remember him being a super heralded recruit, right? Like, he was just a JUCO transfer. I feel like most people's read on him coming in was that he was more of a depth piece, and he ended up being the best and most consistent lineman for this team over the last few years. Played at guard, played at tackle, really did everything except snap the ball at center, and was really interchangeable for the Frogs. And honestly, like last season, dealt with some injuries, but I think more than anything, he was the offensive line outside of him was kind of a mess. So they moved him around a lot. Once they got him back at tackle, that seemed to be the best fit for him, especially in pass protection. The team improved, and he just became one of the most consistent players on the team during a time where TCU had some unprecedented success.
So that was going to be, I think, the main big question that we're trying to answer here in DC, because everyone was freaking out that this team didn't address the tackle position. And because people typically hear, oh, he could play tackle, he could play guard. And it's like, well, yeah, then he's going to play guard in the NFL. That's how that goes. But it seems like Coleman not sticking at tackle for his entire time at TCU seemed to be a lot more about everybody else, not so much about him. What more can you tell me and our audience of Commanders fans about why he moved around so much at TCU?
Well, when the offensive line was at its most stable while he was there, that was the season where they had a great run and beat Michigan in the playoffs. He was at tackle, and then they had three guys graduate, a couple guys that signed, undrafted free agent deals in the NFL. They were reworking the offensive line. And so they had issues in the interior. They brought in some transfers, but it wasn't really working out during fall camp. So essentially they slid him back inside because that was the biggest need along the offensive front, and he was their best O-lineman, and he was interchangeable and had that position flex. And then as the year went on, they were struggling in pass protection. They moved him back to tackle. I mean, at both spots, he only allowed one sack. But I think, he's got an ability to be a mauler, Craig, at times in the run game. He's a good finisher, but honestly, I feel like his biggest asset is athleticism. We talked about him playing basketball growing up. He did really well at the combine, put up great numbers. He moves well. He's able to pull out in space and find work and get up to the next level and make things happen. So that footwork and that ability to, get in a pass set and then use his body well, use his hands well, that really benefits him at the tackle position. And so I think that's where he's in his most natural fit. It's where he played the best this past season once they sort of figured out some moving parts and got him in a more natural position. And then also, like, he's still relatively new to football, because he didn't play until his junior year of high school. And I think that athleticism allowed him to kind of be an interchangeable part along the offensive line. But, his best tape and his best games were at that tackle position. And I think because of his ability and availability, he was just someone who kind of had to be everywhere for them to try to fill in the gaps in what was a team that dealt with some injuries and some inexperience up front last season.
Steven Simcox, host of the Locked On Horned Frogs podcast, is with us here on the Hoffman Show, talking about Brandon Coleman, the third-round pick from TCU for the Commanders. Now, he, as you said, switched positions, was bounced back and forth a bit his final year at TCU. From what I understand, he was also battling some injuries. How did he play, and how much did the injuries affect how he played?
He left the game against Texas Tech with an ankle injury, and that was a prevailing theme throughout the year. Also was dealing with some knee problems, but he gutted through it. I mean, I think he showed a lot of toughness. It did affect his play. I feel like he was a step slower than normal, but they needed him on the field, and he was there. He played through that. And that's really been the only issue. I mean, he had some ligament damage his first season on campus. That was a season-ending injury. But other than that, he's been really healthy. You know, he played just about every snap in that 2022 season at left tackle. But, yeah, did deal with some kind of being banged up throughout the year this past season, but seemed to handle that well and at least was a factor on the field. And I think Brandon Coleman at 80 or 90% was better than the other options they had, so they kept running him out there as long as he was able to kind of get through the pain and play at the level that he could.
One thing that's a consistent through line for the Commanders in their draft class is they got really physical, tough guys who finished. They were team captains, leaders. What can you tell us about Brandon Coleman, like the human and the football character of a guy like Coleman?
He's got a nasty streak to him, and I mean in a good way, the type of toughness and physicality you want from an offensive lineman. He likes to put guys on the ground. He likes to lay on top of guys once he finishes blocks. So that's a big positive. You know, he brought it each and every week. I think Brandon is more of a lead-by-example type of guy. He talked last season about how the coaches were encouraging him because of his leadership and his experience on the team to be more vocal, even though that's a little bit more out of his comfort zone. But super interesting guy. I mean, as I said, really intriguing background, you know, lived overseas and is carries himself really well, high character player. I think the Commanders are getting someone who can come in, take care of his business, and should be a great fit in the locker room right away. And obviously, I don't think they'll be asking him for that type of immediate leadership, but he has great work ethic and should be someone who just comes in and kind of falls in line with what everybody else is doing.
Every college is a little bit different in terms of access, so I don't know how much personal time you've gotten to spend with him or for people who have gotten to spend time with him. But do you have any specific stories? Like, do you have a Brandon Coleman story that you can share?
Yeah, I mean, I got to talk to him. Probably the best access we got was at Big 12 Media Days. And he's a really funny dude. You know, he's relatively quiet. I guess all those guys kind of are in those media settings for the most part, but seems to get along great with his teammates. You know, that was the big takeaway I had from the time that I got with him was that the guys loved him. They respected him. You know, he was joking around with Bud Clark last year, who was another, you know, main piece of the teams the past few seasons, and super interesting guy. So excited for Commanders fans to get to know him because, yeah, he's a great player and from all accounts seems like a really good person too.
And then last thing, I'm gonna lead on the NFC East down there, Steven, since you're in the neighborhood. I loved the first couple of picks, especially from the Cowboys. Their draft seems to have very mixed reviews. What do you make of what the Cowboys did over the weekend?
I mean, staying in the Big 12, I really like the Cooper Beebe pickup. And then they also got Tyler Guyton in the first round, which I think makes sense, even though he seems like more of a development prospect. The thing I don't understand, Craig, is, you know, I know they had a long gap in between picks in the third round and fifth round, but not coming away with a running back is a head scratcher to me. I know they're reuniting with Zeke, which to me kind of feels like getting back with an old flame when you don't want to download a dating app again. But yeah, Dallas is constantly interesting. I feel like Dak is at his best when they've got a strong running game, and I know, you know, paying running backs is not in vogue now, but I thought they would have put more investment in that position going into this upcoming season.
Yeah, it's one of those things, Steven, where I look at what they did, and I'm like, I like all that stuff, but you guys didn't do a thing that you needed to. And by the way, you guys can do it in a way that others can't because you have a lot of other needs that are filled. But, well, alas, Jerry, there's only so much Will McClay can do. It's a lesson I learned when I was working down there long ago. Steven Simcox, Locked on Horned Frogs is the podcast. If you want anything else on TCU. Steven, this was great, man. Really appreciate your time. Thanks so much for spending some time with us here on the Hoffman Show.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Steven Simcox with us again here on the Team 980. Brandon Coleman himself was on the Team 980 earlier today, as was the Commanders' 5th-round pick, Jared McGee. You'll hear some of what they had to tell Chris Russell next. More on the Commanders' 2nd-round picks at the top of the hour, 6 p.m. from Logan Paulson. That's, of course, wow, now I'm blanking on their names. Jerzon Newton and Ben Sinnott and Mike Sainristil. Just total brain fartage. That's the signs that we're having a great show, Chris. I've been giving it so much effort, I can't remember basic information anymore. It's okay. It's okay. We're locked back in. We're getting right to it. You'll hear Logan Paulson, his intelligence at 6 p.m. It will make up for the last 30 seconds of this radio show. If you rewind all the way earlier in the day to the Chris Russell show, though, or check out Russell's podcast feed, you can hear full interviews with Brandon Coleman and Jordan McGee, the 3rd and 5th round picks from the Commanders. A few bites from those now, though, as we get to know and get to hear from the Commanders rookie class, which, by the way, is just full of tremendous stories. But let's not bury the lead. Let's make sure we get right to it. Does Brandon Coleman see himself as more of a tackle or a guard? This, of course, is the question for the coaches. Do they see him more as a tackle or a guard? But what does the man himself say?
Yeah, I mean, I started off my career in high school playing tackle, and then my coaches at TCU were the ones that switched me to guard in 21.
Right.
So I played mostly left tackle and tackle in my career. So see myself more as a tackle, but tried to just work that guard in there to have that flexibility and feel comfortable there too as well.
But there's also this.
With that being an opening, I wouldn't be surprised if they would try me at tackle going into minicamp and all that stuff. But to be honest, wherever they would need me as, I'd be excited just to be on the field, be able to compete with them and compete for a spot. So I'm really excited just to be there and play wherever they need me at.
Classic offensive lineman. Yeah, whatever you need me. But that's what you want. And I think that it's funny because a lot of times if you have two positions, you don't have one. Position flex is sometimes code for this dude actually ain't that good. But it also can work out in different ways because Sam Cosmi could have been a fine NFL tackle. Brandon Sheriff could have been a fine NFL tackle. Sheriff is an all-pro guard, and Cosmi could be on his way to being a Pro Bowl or maybe even all-pro guard. You ultimately have to figure out what is best for the player and what's best for the team, and you hope that those two things align. You hope that Brandon Coleman is a great left tackle or is best at left tackle and hopefully a really good one at the very least, if not great, because that's where the team needs him to be, frankly. They need a left tackle. But if he winds up being a guy could be a pretty good tackle, and maybe you address tackle a year from now in the draft and you go, hey, man, thanks for sucking it up for the year, but we're going to kick you inside because we think you'll be an awesome guard. You draft a Pro Bowl guard in the third round, like that's a hell of a use of a third-round pick. So there are good options. And again, the thing with Coleman, to reiterate here, is unlike a lot of guys who are kind of on the verge athletically of being tackle guard and wind up kicking inside, his is just he's played some guard and he's got heavy hands and he's kind of got a boxy frame, but it's a big box as in his arms are long enough. Like he's got wide shoulders. That's a better way to put it, right? He's got like big, broad, guard-looking shoulders, but he's also got 34.5-inch arms, which is plenty long enough to play at tackle. That's a good length for a tackle. Nevertheless, just barely enough. And he's got great feet and movement skills, and he seems to have a good feel for space. So maybe he will wind up being a tackle. But this is a kid who grew up overseas, grew up in Germany as his dad was in the military, didn't wind up back in the U.S. until his mid-teens. So Russell and Linnell earlier today asked Brandon Coleman about how his family's military background shaped who he became.
I wanted to ask you about your journey through life and how it led to you here. What did moving around and being a military family and just dealing with all of that teach you about life and work ethic and being on time and discipline to get Brandon Coleman to this point?
Yeah, like I said, I've been moving around a lot, and I think that had a lot to do with just how I was able to adapt to those different situations I was in, moving colleges, especially from JUCO to a new environment, especially Power 5, a different level, a different atmosphere. And also through life, my dad was like a big cornerstone in helping me really show me what it means to be disciplined, what it means to be on point and on time, and what really it means to work hard, and put effort in. It's not a sprint, but it's a marathon, which I had to learn throughout my career too, with injuries and setbacks. People being at a higher level than I was just because I started football that late. But yeah, it was a lot of different things that helped me kind of get my identity and figure out how I was supposed to go through this process.
And if being a military brat, having to travel around, make new friends, every time you settle in, the difficulties that come with that lifestyle as a child weren't enough, and if starting football in your teens wasn't enough of a challenge to get to the NFL level, he had to go through the JUCO path as well, which is often not easy and obviously requires a big leap once you ultimately get to Power 5, nevertheless, NFL footballs. But how did that path through JUCO shape Brandon Coleman?
Just to get to realize this dream, what does it mean to you? And then how do you think your journey and your process primes you for being, hopefully, the future left tackle here in Washington?
Yeah, first of all, I appreciate you congratulating me. And, JUCO can have its ups and downs, more lows than highs at times. But, definitely that was probably one of the biggest influences on who I am as a player, especially still learning the game.
Yeah.
You know, JUCO being able to kind of build me up in my mentality, especially, you know, it's a lot of tough things that happen in JUCO from, like you said, the meals, trying to figure out where you're going to eat. I ate a bunch of those 50-cent Burger King nuggets for dinner. Just making it work. So, you know, you just got to figure out how you're going to get it. And practice was always tough. You know, those players, they can be, you know, those tough guys, dirtbags, but
Yep.
in the end of the day, you're still a brotherhood no matter where you play at, and those guys really helped me learn the way to play the game and develop me into like that tough guy and that mentality that, you know, you can see on tape. So I'm really appreciative of that time. And then, you know, being able to take that to a Power 5 conference where a lot of kids don't appreciate what they got, and you come from JUCO, you think you're in a 5-star resort. You know, it just helps you kind of understand a different perspective of what it's like to be at that type of school and play at that level.
And then last but not least, from Brandon Coleman, the TCU, hopefully tackle, offensive lineman, heading here to Washington. When he gets here, he's going to have some stiff competition. And that's not just like Corn Lucas is a pro that you got to beat out. No, I'm talking about when he gets on the field in a regular season game. And, oh, there's Micah Parsons twice a year. Oh, there's all them dudes in Philly twice a year. Oh, there's Kayvon Thibodeau and company in New York twice a year. Nevertheless, the rest of the rushers around the league. But Chris and Linnell asked Brandon Coleman about the competition getting ready to face him in the NFC East.
I mean, yeah, obviously those are like some of the greatest, you know, D linemen and pass rushers in the league right now. They're great and athletic, and I'm just, you know, excited to be able to go against those guys. It'll definitely be a tough battle and a great battle. But I'm excited for that stuff, you know, be able to study those guys, figure out their moves, and then go out there and compete and battle all game. You know, that's the stuff that they're able to do in college in those big games that we had, and be able to do that stuff week by week now is great, really exciting.
They also had Jordan McGee on earlier today, the Commanders' 5th-round pick, the linebacker. And again, both these interviews available in full in the Chris Russell Show podcast feed or by rewinding in the free Odyssey app. But they started off by asking McGee if he has something to prove this season, fell into the 5th round. And, you know, look, some guys know, like, yeah, I'm going to get drafted in the 5th round. Some guys don't. Some guys feel like they fell. But there's no one who gets drafted in the 5th round that's happy about it. No one's like, yes, I was a 5th-round pick. No, guys are competitive. They want to get out. They always think they should have gone higher. So what does Jordan McGee see is whether or not he's got something to prove in 2024?
You were top 5 at the linebacker position in every major testing category, yet you fell to where you fell at with Washington. Is there a chip on your shoulder heading into this rookie season, Jordan, to try to prove people wrong? And I know, you know, for you, first things first, it's about having your spot secure. But you can't tell me that you don't feel a little bit slighted about where you were drafted because you're an athletic freak, my man.
Yeah, most definitely. You know, I put my faith in God. You know, everything happens for a reason. Everything happened how it's supposed to happen. And I always work with a chip on my shoulder. I always play with a chip on my shoulder just because that's who I am. And being from Delaware, you know, a small state, you know, we get overlooked a lot as football players. So, you know, just having that chip on my shoulder since a kid is just a big thing.
Obviously, McGee will go into a room with Bobby Wagner amongst others. So what's going to be like to walk into that veteran linebacking room for the Commanders?
Yeah, it's a blessing. You know, it's crazy. Bobby Wagner's a Hall of Famer, of course.
Yes.
And then you got Coach Ken Norton, and him just being a linebacker. He used to be a linebacker and one of the best linebacker coaches in today's game. You know, just getting knowledge from those two guys, you know, is going to be a great opportunity. I actually had Zoom meetings with Coach Norton, just doing some basic install of the defense.
McGee obviously fits the mold of what the Commanders wanted. Physical player. Obviously, you heard Linnell's question, that first one about the athletic upside that he has. He's got a little bit of a nasty streak to him, too, as heard in this question and answer.
You know, everybody knows the athlete side to side, but you look like an explosive freaking hitter, which is going to get people all lathered up here. What about your game you think maybe translates best to the NFL? And do you love to hit people in a legal sort of way?
Oh, yeah. Of course, you know, I love to hit people. You know, defense was my first side of the ball playing football. And, you know, I just fell in love with it ever since, you know, just being able to run around and hit people and, you know, not get in trouble for it.
You definitely don't want to get in trouble for
Exactly.
it.
Yeah, but especially with this new rule, this hip drop tackle. You know, have to change your ways a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, you can still hip drop tackle. That's not about hitting. That's about how you wrap up. So just, Jordan McGee will get that figured out. Still pop people just fine. Last but not least, of course, McGee went to Temple in Philadelphia, which meant that presumably Russell, maybe this was a Linnell question. I missed the end of this interview live. Maybe I'll go check it out on the Russell Show podcast feed. But they asked him his favorite cheesesteak order or his preferred cheesesteak order. And honestly, this is the kind of journalism that I live for.
You played your college ball at Temple. You know a good cheesesteak, right? I mean, I know you're a chiseled athlete, and you probably can't have too many cheesesteaks. Are you with onions or without, like Cheese Whiz or the real cheese? What are we doing here?
All right, so boom. Me, I get salt, pepper, ketchup. Let me see. I get salt, pepper, ketchup, sweet peppers, and onions.
Okay. Sounds like
that's what I get. No cheese whiz. I don't like cheese whiz.
So just regular cheese, like the sliced cheese melted on top.
Yeah.
See, that's a good call.
That is a pro move. I mean, look, the whiz is fine, but you can get all kinds of sliced cheese. Like you want to elevate your cheesesteak? Sure, take it from a guy with a dairy allergy, but I used to have them before I realized I had a dairy allergy. Provolone, pro move right there. The ketchup's an interesting choice, though. I see it, like the idea of beef and tomato, like that's not revolutionary, but it's an interesting choice. I'll have to survey my Philly people and see what we think about that. But hey, I'm also a team don't yuck someone else's yum. So if he enjoys it, get that man a cheesesteak. The full interviews with Jordan McGee and Brandon Coleman available again by rewinding in the free Odyssey app to earlier today. You can do that anytime in the 24 hours after those interviews aired between 1 and 4 today on the Chris Russell Show or at your own convenience anytime, anywhere by searching the Chris Russell Show in your favorite podcast app. When we get back here on the Team 980, Logan Paulson chimes in on the Commanders' second-round picks. We're talking draft, NBA playoffs, so much on the docket today here on the Team 980. I do believe Yates will be back with us on Friday, today on a Wednesday here on the Hoffman Show. We've had a couple of great guests, Howard Beck, Ben Standig. Steve Simcox was great as well, a trio of great guests from Locked on Horned Frogs, gave us some insight on Brandon Coleman. Interesting story out of Colorado with the just incredible number of transfers out of the Colorado program. And a story written in The Athletic that's gotten a lot of attention that I want to talk about coming up at 6:30. But right now, time for a little Take Command for you. And Logan Paulson and I breaking down the Commanders' second-round picks in depth. Of course, they get a couple of them and the trade for Cooper DeJean. So ultimately 3 second-rounders, starting with Jer'Zhan Newton at 36, and then the 2 that they got in the trade. Here's the breakdown here. Take Command on a Wednesday for you. All right, let's get to the players themselves, Logan. And Adam Peters was stunned that he had the ability to pick Johnny Newton, number 36. I can't say I was stunned only because there was a foot injury that caused some concern, a Jones fracture, which is a really serious foot injury. But Newton ultimately there for the Commanders. They take him at 36. Based off the tape alone, it seems like a great value. There's some people that thought he was neck and neck for Byron Murphy, who some people had as the best defensive player in this draft. So to get a guy who's that good at 36 seems like a great pick. But for those that are wondering more about Johnny Newton, what did the Commanders just draft?
Yeah, so, in terms of my evaluation, again, we just talked about how that's kind of like, not worth anything because it's about the Commander's evaluation. But, he's a guy that I liked a lot. I had Byron Murphy ahead of him by a margin. I had Byron Murphy in that kind of, what is that, 12 to 20 range, in my opinion. And then Jer'Zhan was probably 25 to 35, and so I did have him as a first-round player, and I just thought he had to go to the right situation. So when he was there, I was, really surprised. Because I think when you watch him, he uses his hands well. He plays really hard. He's got a good feel. He gets a lot of, I don't want to say junk pressures, but he just plays so hard. He falls into stuff, which is awesome. He pursues the football well. He doesn't have this elite bend. He's not elite twitchy, but it's really, really good, And I think when you kind of package it all together, how hard he plays, the hand usage, the kind of pass rush feel, coupled with the plus athleticism. Again, it's not plus, but it's pretty good. I just see a guy I'm really excited to see how they use him on the defensive front. I just think about last year when Duran rushed from the outside a little bit and how that created so many mismatches along the offensive line. Is that a guy that can also do that? Can you line him up over the tackle, get a bigger body type out there, compress the pocket, and use these 3 kind of special players, not just as rotationals and kind of hockey subbing each other, but as a way to kind of create mismatches along the front? I think so. And I think, again, you wanted to get better, more dynamic pass rush. I think he does this for you. And again, I think the floor is very, very high with him because of how hard he plays and because of his leadership. And again, he's a guy that's going to try to get better. He's got a chip on his shoulder now, right? Because he wasn't taken in the first round. It sounded like he thought he should have been taken in the first round. So I'm really excited. And I'm also excited because I do feel like this defensive staff here now is going to have a more creative way to develop these players and a more creative way to deploy the players. And so I can't wait to see with a talent like Johnny Newton, where this ends up going.
Yeah, a lot of people, I did a couple of hits with our hosts and everything over the weekend, and the first question is well, what does it mean for John Allen? And they play the same position. There are 3 techniques, on a baseline level. It doesn't mean they can't play together. You can creatively use those guys together for sure, whether that's 3 down fronts or whether that's lining up double 3 tech. That's something that some teams have done recently, create some different angles, some different ways to attack certain gaps, whether it's run, pass, etc., all that kind of stuff. So there's ways you can do it. But I think on an even more fundamental level, John Allen is getting obviously up there in age, and he battled an injury all of last year. It'd be really nice to not have to play John Allen 85% of snaps, which it felt like you had to do the past bunch of years. Yeah, you're paying him a bunch of money to play a lot. I'm not saying John Allen needs to play half the snaps, but dang, it'd be really nice to be able to sub him out a little bit more to get the best of John Allen And then, yeah, in a couple of years, like he's going to be, I can't believe this already, but like John Allen's damn near 30 years old. And contractually, if they want to, just the facts of the case are he's got no guaranteed money left after this year, so they can move on if they want to. But I think even more on that short term, Logan, like the ability to get more creative and maybe kick John outside as a rusher sometimes to potentially just not have him on the field as much. It's not necessarily, there's John Allen's replacement. Long term, realistically, yeah, he probably is. But it's also a John Allen like current maintenance plan that gets me excited about what John Allen can do this year, nevertheless what Jazon Newton can do.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Like one of the things when I talk to some of my defensive line clients that are around the NFL and just in terms of how they approach utilization along the defensive line, it's like, oh yeah, we want to, like this team that I'm with, they want to rotate as much as possible. Like one of the major advantages for the defensive line is that you don't have to play every snap. Offensive linemen do. So why don't I get the fresher, more productive, more explosive player out there as much as possible? And again, like I agree with you. I think one of the reasons John's production waned a little bit last year was because he was just playing too much. Like he can't be the best version of himself when you're on the field all the time, right? That goes for a lot of positions except for O-line. So I would say like having this piece in there, again, I think Ridgeway's a good player. We haven't seen Phil kind of develop, but having just another piece in there that says, hey, John, we don't have to like here, we'll give you a blow on first and second down, right? We'll let the young buck in there and play the 3 technique, or John Ridgway's in there, and just giving them more opportunity to keep their legs fresh, take the pounding off their body. I think that's 100% the right approach. And so I do think it makes the football team better in the short term. I think it makes John Allen better in the short term. And also, is it a contingency plan moving forward? I have no idea. Jazon Newton, as much as I like him as a player, might just be a guy moving forward. And that's fine. You need guys, right? He might just be a guy. But he also could develop into someone that you say, hey, we can replace John Allen with this player. So I'm not gonna speculate on John Allen's future because John Allen is shown.
Yeah, we don't know. I mean, we don't know. John Allen might not be that good in this scheme. He might be the best version that we've ever seen. We don't know.
We don't know. And so I think yes, is that a possibility? 100%. But I also think in the immediate impact of this player is awesome. Right?
Yeah.
We get to rotate our guys more. We get to be more creative with rush packages. We added another explosive playmaker, hopefully, and we'll see how it goes from there. So I 2 years from now, 3 years from now, I don't know. Like I've seen guys get drafted that are supposed to be the second coming or whatever, and that's just not who they are. That's just not who they are as a player. That's not who they are as a person, and you have to kind of adjust accordingly. So, we'll see what goes on. I hope the best for Johnny. I think he's going to be an excellent player. Hope the best for John. I think them working together is going to be great for the team. So,
yeah, it's going to be really fun to watch how creative they want to get. Mike Sanders still is the next pick that they made. And by the way, we'll probably get through the second and third rounders today, and we'll look at some of the late round guys in the UDFAs later in the week on the show. But Mike Sanders still guy that I definitely had circled because of the character reasons. And, we talked about this the other day, but like Tirico, who knows the Michigan program really, really well, came on our show, and I was like, who's of all these guys, especially, Colson, Sanders still, these guys that you're looking at second, third round, is there one that stands out as a Dan Quinn guy, as a guy in Mike Tirico who lives in Ann Arbor but has covered the NFL, and Dan Quinn for, as long as Dan Quinn's been in the NFL. And he's like, Mikey is your guy. And sure enough, I think you see it on tape. You watch the press conference, which I did, the conference call that he had with our colleagues in the local media, and like just his personality, the personableness of him, but also the competitive drive. Like it's all there, plain as day. And I think this is also a really intriguing pick, Logan, because to me, this answers one of the questions I've had, which is what do they think of Quan Martin? Or how are they going to use Quan Martin? And it would make sense to me that if they're drafting Mike Sanders still in the second round, Quan's going to be playing a good bit of safety this year, and Sanders still is going to wind up being their nickel guy. And then you obviously have Chin to play with as well as kind of that big nickel, et cetera, in terms of the machinations of the secondary.
Yeah, and I think when you look at Dallas and what they did such a good job with kind of those, multi-safety sets, kind of position, almost like the basketball thing, positionless basketball. You know what I mean? Like are you a linebacker? Are you a safety? Where do you fit? Are you in the post? Are you in the box? Are you a run support player? Are you blitzing? And you've got guys in Quan and Sanders still. We'll see. Obviously, like with the young guys, I'm always a little bit tentative to anoint them as the second coming. Like his film's amazing, but we got to see it at this level. But then you got like your Percy Butlers, your four, like these kind of bigger body athletes that can kind of do a bunch of different stuff. You mentioned Jeremy Chin as well. Like, I think it's going to be really cool. That's one of the things I'm excited now for the offseason is just how do you use that player, that skill set in conjunction with Quan, who was arguably one of our better defenders, not arguably, was one of the better defenders on the team last year, especially down the stretch. So, like, Quan, I think, is an interesting guy because he played outside, he played inside, he played safety. That was one of the alluring parts of him when he came here from Illinois last year. So does he bump outside? Does he come back inside? Is he a box player? He's the Buffalo nickel. Like, Mike Sanders still did play a little outside at Michigan. I don't see him doing that, but I think you get a lot of flexible skill sets. And with a coaching staff that has shown, through their time in Dallas, obviously Dan in Seattle and Atlanta, shown they can be creative. I'm just really curious to see like what they end up doing with these guys and how they best utilize all these different football players. I mean, because that's really what they are. They're not DBs. They're football players, and they're really good football players. So that's going to be something that I'm really, really excited to watch of OTAs, mini camp, and training camp is what shape does this thing take? What packages are they used in? Because you could draft Sanders still and have him be kind of like your 3rd and 10 nickel player, right? Or your kind of sub nickel player, right? And Jeremy Chin could be in the box, and Luvu could be a defensive end, and Bobby Wagner could be on the sideline, and you could just, and then maybe the other 3 rushers are defensive tackle. You could do a bunch of stuff, but we got to figure out who is best at what, and it's still so early in the process. But I think the ultimate thing I come back to is you get a guy in Sanders still, and you talked about like his football character's like off the charts, like Saban said the same thing, best pound for pound player in the country type of stuff, right? And when you watch the film, that's what you see. A guy who can blitz, a guy who can tackle, a guy who's got great coverage instincts and great footwork. So I say to myself, I want him on my team. We'll figure out how to use him. And I really think it kind of falls in this bucket of, we're not drafting for need. We're drafting best player available. And I think he was the best player available at the time. I think it was the same thing for Johnny Newton. And I think you just get two really good football players that fit your kind of pedigree and what you wanted to identify in terms of people. And you say, we'll figure out how to use them when they get here.
He's the most Commanders player on the board. Like, for what they want the Commanders to be. And all the things that we've talked about with the character and why they love Jaden and why they love these other guys that we're talking about. Like, nobody embodies that better than Mike Sanders still. And I think I heard it was Nate Tice talking about the Brock Bowers pick that I thought he made a really good point on the Athletic Football Show, where he said, at first you're like, this doesn't really make a lot of sense because you don't really need a tight end. You just drafted Mayer. Like, what are you doing? But there's so many times that we do that on draft day. Then a year later, we look at what a team could have done, and it's like, oh, they passed on the best player available who's now killing it somewhere else. They should have just taken the best player available. And that's why you do it, is because the league changes so fast. And, a year from now, Chin's on a 1-year deal. Maybe they look at Forrest and Butler, and they're like, these aren't our kind of guys, which I have no reason why they'd think that based off what we know of them necessarily going in. But, like, who knows? That's the point. The point is we don't know what it's going to be a year from now. What we do know is on the board in front of us right now is this guy that we think is a really, really talented football player that is the ultimate character guy from what we want. So just take him. Like, don't overthink that, oh, well, where are we going to play him? Nickel, outside? What does that mean for this guy, that guy? Like, yes, you need a plan. And I think that, the classic, like, Puka Nacua example of what happens when you have a plan for a guy, and that plan, that's the best possible outcome of having a plan for a guy. But at the end of the day, if you've got a glut at a certain position, and unless it, like, quarterback and what Atlanta did with Penix is a whole different conversation. Yeah. So take quarterback out of it. As long as it's not quarterback.
And honestly, even with that, like, I kind of get it. You know what I mean? I kind of get it, but, like, we'll talk about that more on a different show.
Yeah, we can talk about that on Thursday. I think it's I get what they're trying to say. It's an indefensible decision. But anyway, like,
I'm going to defend it. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, outside of quarterback, don't worry about having too many of a good thing. We've seen it too much in the NFL, and Mike Sanders still is the obvious correct pick there for them. At 50. Ben Sinnott, 53. Now we get to have the football discussion about him, the Kansas State tight end / H-back / everything. He lined up in the slot. He lined up outside. And I thought it was really interesting that Adam Peters invoked Kyle Juszczyk's name. He said he blocks like Kittle, too. He blocks like both those guys. But it does feel like this could be his Kyle Juszczyk, who he takes in round 2 here. What do you see from him on tape, and how versatile can he be in the NFL?
Yeah, first off, I don't think anybody blocks like George Kittle, but I do think like when
I didn't say it. Adam Peters did. Yell at him, Logan.
Yeah, I'm with you. But I think the thing about Ben Sinnott is that I understand the comparison with both those guys. So like when I first watched Ben Sinnott, I had the same exact idea. I was like, this is Kyle Juszczyk. He's a guy that can play fullback. He can line up outside. He can beat linebackers in one-on-one situations. Because the cool thing about having a guy like that on your roster, right? So like what makes Kyle Juszczyk such a wonderful chess piece is that defenses have to match that personnel with base defense. Unlike 2 tight ends where they can match you in nickel, if you have a fullback in the game because of run fits, you need to add another run defender. So if he wants to, if Ben Sinnott can play that H-back, fullback, tight end hybrid role, it's going to do wonders for your run game, like right off the bat, right? And then you say, well, now you've matched in base defense, and now I have a player in Ben Sinnott who I can line up in the slot or line up out wide, and I have a very high degree of confidence that they can beat a linebacker or a safety in one-on-one situations, right? And again, like he's got to grow and develop into that role, but I love that pick because of that reason. And then when you go to the Senior Bowl, I think this is one of the benefits of going to the Senior Bowl and seeing these athletes there, is he blocks better in line than I thought. Like he didn't really do it a ton at Kansas. Like not that he couldn't do it, but he didn't do it a ton. But seeing him block big ends and like throwing his face in there and playing with that physical edge and then running his routes and able to create some separation at the top, like because his route tree at Kansas State was kind of like these seams and, you know, kind of languid corners, which worked for the concept, but you didn't see the suddenness, right? And so I saw a more sudden mover. I saw a guy that was competitive in the run game. I saw a guy that was physically tough. And again, if he can grow into that role that Adam Peters described, physically, he looks like he can. Like physically, like right off the jump in terms of how they used him in college, it's not like a big jump, but talk about a piece that would be awesome in terms of dictating matchups with personnel, dictating responses from the defense with personnel, and a guy that I think has significant pass game upside. It's really exciting. And again, you look at what Zach Ertz brings as a receiver, and this is something totally different because of the down and dirty approach that you get from that player. It forces different adaptations from the defense. So it's a very exciting pick, I think, a guy that I liked a lot coming out. And I think, you know, people say, oh, well, look, Logan, you had Jared Wiley ahead of him, right? But I think for what this team needs and the way he described the role, taking him here makes 100% sense because Jared Wiley doesn't fit that role. Theo Johnson doesn't fit that role.
No.
This is the guy that fits that role.
I also think it's interesting because for as much as people associate like 10 personnel with Cliff and people are like, they need more receivers, and they obviously got one, but they need more receivers because they're going to be 4 wide. It's like, no, as you look at Cliff's last 3 years in Arizona, they played in 12 a lot. And the funny thing about Sinnott is, like, when he's out there, are you in 12 or are you in 21? Like, that's the beauty 21. Of it, right? Like, do you count him as a fullback?
He does have enough pass game upside, I think, to kind of be in that kind of even 11 range. You know what I'm saying? It's a very unique piece.
But as a defense, like, you have to make that determination, which is exactly what you were saying, right? Is like, is he a fullback? Like, we don't know before they break the huddle. We can't really, have a linebacker and a cornerback waiting there to see whether we should match with our nickel or go to base. So we probably treat it like 21 most of the time. But that's the thing. Is like Cliff used 12 personnel a ton. And Sinnott now gives you even more versatility within that 12/21 personnel because of who he is. And I think Cliff will definitely lean into that in the ways that Kyle Shanahan has with Kyle Juszczyk. So, just adding to kind of that chess piece thing, because people don't associate that kind of stuff with Cliff. Like, I actually think Cliff has shown that already, and nevertheless, will continue to evolve with that here in Washington.
Yeah, 100%. And again, when you watch him in 2021, like Max Williams, the guy from Minnesota, he went to Minnesota College. He was drafted by Baltimore, but they used him kind of like a fullback. The problem with Max Williams is he's like 6'6", like 265. So some of those insertion blocks, some of those counters were just tough for him to move around and make those blocks. And I think with Ben Sinnott, because he's a better athlete, he's a little bit more compactly built, he can do that stuff a little bit more reticently. So maybe that package expands, So again, I think it's a wonderful pick. I think it fits the role, especially when you describe the role. There was no better player in this draft to fill that role, and I see the value there in the second round for sure.
When we get back on the Hoffman Show, there was a story that caught a lot of traction earlier this week from The Athletic about the mass exodus of transfers from Colorado. It's not just the sheer number that caught people's attention, though. And we'll talk about why and kind of the larger implications next here on the Team 980. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. We're going to get to the Colorado bit in a few minutes here. But I just noticed on the phone lines you got a couple of people who called in, including I think an old friend, someone who's called in earlier this week. Let's go out to the listener line. Marvin, is that you?
Yes, you got me, Brother Hoffman. I'm glad you got me back on the air. I'm not going to actually say what I said to your producer.
Oh, lucky me.
That might have been derogatory towards you because I don't want to take a victory lap or anything because it's not really a victory lap. But I will say, by just listening to your show, my conviction or my estimation that the draft really hinges on Brandon Coleman playing left tackle sounds so validated by listening to Ben Standig and a lot of people who think he's still more of a guard. just like what I said 2 days ago. And people were calling me like nuts. I saw the dude said, he must not know anything about football. Hey, look, dude, I'm 50-something years old. I watched Chris Samuels. I watched Jim Lachey. I watched Joe Jacoby. I watched all these great – and my fault, Trent Williams. I've seen them all. So what I'm saying is I recognize a good left tackle. And what I'm saying is he looked like a guard. I'm not saying – let me preface everything. Let me preface it. I like every draft pick that they picked.
Marvin, hold on. I'm going to stop you right there. I'm not going to hang up on you, but I'm going to stop you right there. You called in and said the Commanders draft, you gave a D-.
Because. You want to let me say the because?
Do you realize how insane it is to say I love every draft pick they got and then give them a D-? What school did you go to, bro? That school must have sucked.
Actually, I'm a teacher, which is really funny. But check this out. What I'm saying
I feel
is,
terrible for your students. Hey, man, sorry, Johnny. This paper was awesome, except for this one thing that we don't know about, so you get a D-.
Yeah, but it all hinged on that one thing. If your premise on that paper was that XY did XY and you don't actually do anything to prove that, then you're really not helping the story. What I'm saying is the whole page, the whole draft hinges on can I protect my incredible investment at 2. And I'm telling you, there's only one thing I would have done. And that probably was being, a little bit clickbaitish when I said D-. I would probably think more like a C. Yeah, more like a C, but the C.
But here's the other
like
thing about this, though. With Coleman has played better at tackle than he has guard. So if you've tuned into the show and heard other people say, like, yeah, this is an important pick, yes, that is one thing. But also, we had a guy on at 5:30 who covered him at TCU that said he is a much better tackle than he is at guard. The only reason he was playing guard is because they needed someone to get out there and play guard because they were so banged up, and they had other backups who were better backup tackles than backup guards, and their whole season solidified and got better when they finally could move him back to left tackle. They also went to the national championship game in 2022 when he played almost exclusively at left tackle. When I say almost exclusively, I mean 997 out of 1,006 snaps.
I have no doubt that he played well, and I have no doubt that he actually has a chance to play left tackle. I just see more of a guard in him, but that's not the point. The point is the C of the draft, the reason why I give the grade is because they didn't take another bite at the apple. And I think they overdrafted Sinat. I mean, I just heard what Logan Paulson just said, but I think that was overdrafted. Like I said, I would have took a true left tackle, even though I don't know if everybody, I just would have been really aggressive.
There was no true left tackle available when they were on the clock.
He was a left tackle, man. It really was.
Who?
He's a big Kingsley Suamatia.
The guy who they don't know if they can rely on to show up out here because he had to transfer from Oregon. Like, we had this conversation the other day. You don't get to say the same things and not have the same issues with the things that you were saying. That's not how the facts work.
Wait a minute. I thought you said he transferred his freshman year.
Yes, he did. Because he transferred. No, he transferred because he went to Oregon. Like, he's initially, he spent a lot of time on the Hawaiian Islands, and then eventually his family moved when he was in high school to Utah, so all of his family is in Utah. He went to Oregon because he got recruited to play there, and he really liked the coach initially, and he didn't last the full season because he got homesick. And then he went back, and he played at BYU so he could be in his own backyard. And I don't know whether that ultimately affected Washington's ability to keep him on their board or not, to pretend like that isn't potentially an issue, especially when he winds up in Kansas City, one of the teams that's closest to Utah geographically. I would bet money that there were teams that did not have Kingsley Suamatia on their boards, period, because they didn't think he would be comfortable there, which, by the way, is not only a service to the kid, but is a service to the team.
Now, I don't know anything about the story, so I'm playing ignorant to that. I didn't really know that story, so I'm going to sit there and say, well, I didn't know any of that. Well, that's a little twist to this, but I still would have been taking a bigger bite at the apple. I still would have been drafting 2 tackles. I'd have took Patrick Paul. I would have taken a left tackle at 53 and 67. I would have been trying to make sure.
I hate to do this to you, Marvin, but how many Super Bowl rings you got?
Wiley on the field anymore.
Marvin, how many Super Bowl rings you got?
I got 16 Super Bowl. No, I got no Super Bowl.
Okay, how many's Adam Peters got?
I think he has 5, maybe?
Yeah, it's a
No,
lot.
4.
I'm just going to have to default to Adam Peters here. And that's not to say that we all can't have our opinions. But when you call up and say, like, oh, I might have been a little bit clickbaity for this one thing, because you would do something different from a draft strategy than a general manager who was the most coveted general manager, not just this past hiring cycle, but multiple hiring cycles, who turned down multiple jobs and then finally found the exact place he wanted to work and came here. And by the way, the reason he's a general manager is because he's so well regarded as an evaluator and a team builder. I'm just going to defer to him on his board, what he thinks, his things, and just tell you, man, like, it's okay to just be like, hey, we don't know and I'm interested without giving a grade.
That's not what I said. That's not what I said. I do believe in the players he drafted. I don't think they're going to be bust or anything. What I'm saying is we have watched over the last 10 years, maybe the last 20 years, our offensive line be very, very average. I mean, we really have.
That's not even true. Like, that's the thing, Marvin. I think the reason people got so agitated with your call the other day, and why I'm starting to get agitated here, is like you say stuff like it's fact that's just wrong. Like, that's not how facts work. I was on the beat from 2015 to 2020 when their offensive line was far and away the best part of their team. Like, I covered Trent Williams and Brandon Sheriff in person. I'm going to hit you with a Curtis Bergman. I know, because I was there. Like, you can't tell me that. That's not true.
I'll give you that. I'll give you that they had two, like, good offensive linemen, okay?
Their whole unit was really good for a long stretch of that because they had the best O-line coach in football, who, by the way, I don't even like in Bill Callahan.
You know something? I honestly, you know, maybe I'm revisionist history. I don't really remember that offensive line being just like top 5 or top 10. They might have been average at best just because they had Trent Williams. I saw Trent Williams get smoked on a daggone 3rd and 8 in the playoffs against Green Bay, against a guy who didn't even.
Oh, Marvin, what do you teach?
Math.
Oh, that's terrifying because, man, I don't know if you've gotten to the lesson on sample sizes yet, but I got some news for you, buddy, when you get there.
I teach art and math. So
oh, it seems like your analysis is far more artistic than it is mathematical. I got to let you run because we're out of time. I appreciate the banter. You proved nothing, but thank you for calling again. When we get back, we're going to talk about the Colorado story. I needed that. I needed that call. I needed it. Just inject the energy into my veins. Oh, if you just missed Marvin calling back and trying, if zero is didn't help his case at all, Metal Chris and for Anthony today, and 10 is like he won the case walking away. No, jury took 30 seconds, came back with a verdict that he wanted. What score on a 1 to 10 do we give Martin there, Chris?
I would give him like a 1. And he gets a point for being a teacher because that's a noble job.
Yeah, no, Marvin, salute to you. Salute to you. Thanks for teaching. I do have concerns about the sample size thing. But man, that was rough in the best way possible. I hope everyone was as entertained. I will say the YouTube chat was quite entertained by that. So that was fun. If you missed Marvin's call, we can get that up in the podcast feed and on YouTube on demand as soon as possible, or you can just rewind in the Odyssey app. Quickly here, might try to do more on this later in the week. We talked with Clinton Yates about what's going on at Colorado with Deion through the ups and the downs of everything that's gone on at that program since he took over. Deion's unique space is a force in college football for whatever he is being forceful for in the moment. But there was a story written in The Athletic this week that tracked all of the 50-plus transfers out of the Colorado program. And it was really well done. It's good journalism in that we've heard about all these numbers, but it put human names and faces to the story of, okay, where did these 53 players, I think it was, that transferred out of Colorado go? And, like, who are they? And what was their story? And what was the process of them leaving? And it was incredibly impersonal. It was on Deion's front. I like a lot of what Deion's done, and even sometimes where he's faced some criticism, I'm like, I'm kind of on Deion's side here. But this is, to me, emblematic of a bigger problem within college football. And it is, I think, the ever problem of college sports in general, which is the failure to realize who are the kids and who are the adults. And you often have coaches acting like petulant children or, actors, while you have kids who are forced to make grown-up decisions without the resources because they're not grown-ups. Like, at the end of the day, college kids all mature, and we all mature, whether you're in college or not, at different levels as we age. And this has to do, not to get too deep into the brain science, but like the development of the prefrontal cortex and the parts of the brain that are responsible for decision-making and risk mitigation and, emotional clarity and all of these things. Like, those are things that are developing into your mid or sometimes late 20s. And kids and how they are able to make decisions about their lives and their futures are going to obviously not have be as well equipped to do that as they will be if they can make those decisions when they're 32 instead of 22, 28 instead of 18. And I think there's a responsibility, as much as college sports is big business, there is a responsibility on the adults in the situation to act like adults. And I think what rubs me so wrong about the story is Deion Sanders wants to win, and he should want to win. That is a part of his job, and ultimately the university wants Deion to win and make money, and those two things go together. And so they're going to empower him to do what he's got to do. But if I was the president of the University of Colorado and I read that story and I saw how impersonally and dismissive Deion Sanders was, and especially in the aftermath, some of the things that Deion has said when he talks about just like throwing out the trash, basically, and he dehumanizes these kids that he was responsible for as the head of the program, I'd be ashamed if I was Colorado. And I don't use that word lightly. If I was the academic side of that institution, I would just be like, we love so much what you're doing, but we can't do that. Like, we have a responsibility. And especially when, for whether it's former coaches or in some cases, Deion himself recruited these kids and then kicks them out a year later because they're not good enough at football. And it's like, hey, if I walked into your living, or if I'm a parent and you walked into my living room and said you were going to take care of my kid, and I trusted you with that, and you betrayed my trust, I'd be pretty pissed. And so I think for years, college football and college athletics told lies to itself to restrict movement for kids on transfers and make them sit out a year and punish them and all of these things while letting coaches do whatever they want. And now they're like, oh, we'll see these kids. And it's like, yeah, these kids. These kids are going to act like kids because they're kids. What are the adults going to do? And that, to me, is ultimately the question that, we can explore maybe tomorrow or later on in the week on the phones. And I want to talk to Clinton about it, and I want to talk to some other folks about it, because reading that story just, to me, reeks of so much of what is wrong with college football over the last decade, 2 decades, as long as I've really been following, is that when we run into problems, it's not actually because of the kids. It's because the adults refuse to act like adults. And not that kids need to be coddled by any stretch, but we do need to remember they're 20 years old or 19 years old, 18 years old. And I think the older I get now, as I sit here at 34, the younger I realize just how young that is. And maybe in college, or maybe when I was younger, I didn't think that. I was like, I'm an adult. Leave me alone. No. And I think I was pretty mature for my age. But at the end of the day, you still haven't experienced the real world yet. And not being good enough at college football, when you might like your institution, your friends, your classes, all that kind of stuff, and you were told that you could go there and play, doesn't mean you have to be guaranteed a starting spot. But to get your spot taken on the team taken away, and to be treated while you're a member of the team as if you're disposable, that's, to me, where it crosses the line. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. When we get back, we'll wrap up the show with real things real people said into real microphones. Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're knocking stuff over. We're on the free Odyssey app. Streaming live on YouTube where you can watch me knock stuff over. This is a big metal water bottle. Won't do any damage. Got a metal water bottle and a metal producer. Metal Chris. Appreciate you the last couple days. Filling in. I do believe Ant's going to be back tomorrow. Ant's had a rough couple days with some family stuff, which I will let him share if he wants to. But ultimately, just want our guy and sending the best to his family. If you want to just send Anthony a tweet or something like that and say, hey, man, thinking about you if you're a part of our extended family here at the Team 980, definitely say that's a good thing to do. But hopefully we'll have our guy back in good spirits tomorrow. So, but Chris, great job. Short notice. Very much appreciate you, sir. Tomorrow on the show, let's see. What do we got tomorrow? Linnell's going to stop by. Never Read the Comments is going to be a disaster of the best actual form, high entertainment. In part because our guy Marvin called back, and so we're going to have two. We could just do a Never Read the Comments on Marvin's calls. That could be on the docket tomorrow. I do want to keep getting into this Dion thing. I think there's more on that topic. So maybe we'll start the show with that tomorrow and the idea of kind of where we are currently in college sports and how comfortable we are with the disposability of college athletes. Because there is, I think, a fair counter argument of, well, at least they're getting paid now with NIL. Of course, the schools aren't actually forking out any of that cash, at least directly. So there's like a yin and a yang, and I kind of want to explore the space and be curious to talk it out with multiple people, which is the beauty of a radio show is, well, we can do that. We can take calls and talk about it. So maybe we'll do that tomorrow. I think Damon Amendolara is going to join us tomorrow as well. We can do some Knicks talk as they try to recover from a pretty rough loss last night at the hands of Tyrese Maxey and the Sixers in Game 6. And then we'll also talk some NFL draft with DA as well. Friday, I think Yates is back in line with us. There was something else we're doing Friday too. I can't remember what it is though, because there's a lot of stuff. A couple days, but we're just continuing on rolling with good shows here on the Team 980. Also, I will say Friday, probably play our chat with Shakira Austin. The Mystics open their preseason on Saturday, and we did 8 interviews with the Mystics on Media Day, 8 for 8, all fantastic. I think I said this yesterday. And we'll play a couple more clips during Real Things, and we'll try to get a couple more of the full interviews on the radio over the next couple of weeks leading up to their opener on the 14th as well. But yeah, Shakira was incredible, and I would just say this: I had to bleep some stuff. That's how you know it was a real good interview, real talk with Shakira Austin. So that might be a Friday hit for us as well. Right now, though, we wrap up the show. It is time for Real Things Real People Said into real microphones.
Real things.
We're not going to be sucked this year.
Real people.
5 and 11. Not very good.
Said into real microphones.
You know, the culture is actually damn good.
All right, here's what we got today. And Metal Chris, I know you're doing some math over there, trying to figure out what the end of our showtime looks like here. But I need you to pay attention on this, because Xavier Legette, the receiver who went to the Carolina Panthers at the top of the second round, he's from South Carolina, my home state, and unlike me, who, because my parents are from New York and my whole family's from New York, I somehow avoided, like, I grew up from the time I was 4 years old in the South, and I don't have a lick of a Southern accent. Xavier Legette has a Southern accent. I want to know what percentage of this you understand.
Accent has garnered a lot of attention. Have you seen
hold on. I
what
want
they
to play this one first. Here we go.
So you woke up a Carolina Panther this morning. Did you have to pinch yourself a little bit?
Oh no, man. I woke up ready, man. I got a call right after I got dressed. They was coming to pick me up at 9:30 in the morning. I told them I'm going to be ready.
Chris, how much of that did you understand?
Maybe like 60%.
I'm going to give you one more listen. I want you to tell me what he said after
Definitely
this.
something about 9:30 in the morning waking up at the end there.
Here we go. You got one more listen.
So you woke up a Carolina Panther this morning. Did you have to pinch yourself a little bit?
Oh no, man. I woke up ready, man. I got a call right after I got dressed. They was coming to pick me up at 9:30 in the morning. I told them I'm going to be ready.
I don't know. Something about jelly in there. I don't know.
That wasn't jelly. That word was drafted. Drafted.
All right.
Here, I will translate.
Oh no, man.
Oh no.
I woke up ready, man.
I woke up ready.
The call right after I got drafted.
They called me right after I got drafted.
They was coming to pick me up at 9:30 in the morning. I told them I'm gonna be ready.
They told me I'm gonna be picked up at 9:30 in the morning. I told them I'm gonna be ready.
The last part I could figure out. The picked up part.
So that obviously got quite a bit of attention as he went a little bit viral and was asked about it later. That was like the first question of the press conference, and it went viral so quickly they got to ask him about his accent later in the press conference.
Accent has garnered a lot of attention. Have you seen what they've been saying about your accent and how much people really love it?
Oh yeah, man, they've been dragging it all over social media. Man. I just tell folk, man, they really just ain't never heard nobody talk for money.
Mullen, South Carolina. Stand up. Let's go. How could you hear that man and just not be excited? He just sounds like a happy fella. And he was. Very, very cool. I love that for Xavier Legette. Getting to stay in the Carolinas, be a Carolina Panther after going to the University of South Carolina. That's our show. We'll see you tomorrow. It's the Hoffman Show. BetMGM tonight is next.